I would like to call to order the November 20th, 2023 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone joining us in person this evening and those who are viewing remotely. The board held an executive session on November 13th regarding personnel and prior to this meeting regarding personnel, legal, and real estate matters. Board members, with the agenda before you, are there any changes? Yes, Dr. Bader.
There were some concerns about policy 903, and so as the chair of the policy committee, I would suggest that we just postpone that until those can be resolved.
All right. Are there any objections to postponing policy 903?
No objections to postponing it. I think it's a good idea because it turns out it's not a PSBA suggested document, and there are some significant changes in it from the last one. So I think postponing for more conversation is a good idea, and for the new board.
All right. Do I need to take a voice vote, or are we good? All right. Are there any, just to double check, are there any objections to postponing 903? All right. We'll postpone that for another meeting then. I would now like to call on the board secretary for a roll call of board members.
Dr. Anderson?
Here.
Dr. Bader?
Here.
Ms. Brandt?
Here.
Dr. Buck?
Here.
Dr. Krabbapura?
Here.
Dr. Duffy?
Here.
Ms. Huff?
Here.
Mr. Leo?
Here.
Ms. Zidney?
Here.
All right. Ms. Yoder is filling in for Mr. Johnson this evening and will now provide us with a superintendent update.
Good evening. Tonight marks the final board meeting for departing members, Mr. Dan Duffy, Mr. Jim Leos, and Ms. Laurel Zidney. On behalf of the district, I want to thank them for their service to our community, for all of their time and energy devoted to our students, our families, and our employees. Their years on the board have coincided with tremendous growth in the form of new schools, curricula, policies, and practices, and their leadership helped steer us through this dynamic period. They proved themselves to be dedicated and able stewards of the district, for which we are grateful. We will miss collaborating with them to guide our schools, and we wish them the very best moving forward. Yes.
Thank you.
I'm also excited to report and share that last week, Radio Park Principal, Mr. Alex Raub, and I were able to represent Radio Park Elementary at the Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence National Conference in Washington, D.C. As the U.S. Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardono, said, for all winners, Radio Park is a model school with much to celebrate. I want to congratulate Radio Park's staff, students, and families for their dedication. We are very proud of them, so thank you. A final reminder, tomorrow is a school day for students in the State College Area School District. There is no school for students Wednesday through Friday, November 22nd through November 24th of this week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'd now like to call on Stephen Fowler to provide us with an update on student initiatives. Thanks for being here, Stephen.
Thank you. On Thursday, November 30th, middle school and high school families are invited to the high school to enjoy the cooking of our culinary arts students and to learn more about social media. The Soup, Spud, and Social Media Night, hosted by our middle and high schools, will feature a free soup and baked potato dinner, followed by a presentation on safely and effectively navigating social media communication. Our high school school resource officer, John Aston, will be joined by other law enforcement experts to discuss apps such as Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, X, formerly Twitter, and Discord. The presentation begins at 6:30 p.m. after the dinner. If you would like a meal, please fill out a reservation form on the district website homepage to help the Culinary Arts Program prepare for the event. The form closes at the end of the business day on Monday, November 27th. Reservations are not required to attend the presentation only. In addition, State High welcomed Gian Paul Gonzalez and a variety of the surrounding schools to a speaking event, something enjoyed by all at the school. Finally, if you have a spare night, State High Thespians is putting together showings of Wish Tree, something you guys should all see. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My son in elementary school saw Wish Tree and thought it was good. So I would encourage everyone to go if you can. Thank you, Stephen. I have a couple of legislative updates to share with the board. Last Wednesday, the Pennsylvania Senate passed legislation authorizing hundreds of millions of new funding for K-12 schools, community college, and educational support units, and public libraries, with a 45-5 vote. However, it also included a $150 million increase to the state's Educational Improvement Tax Credit Program, which provides scholarships to students attending private schools across the Commonwealth. House Democrats voted Wednesday afternoon to strip the EITC funding from the bill, which Republicans says guarantee that the GOP-controlled Senate will not send the bill to Governor Josh Shapiro's desk. All this is to say that we are here in November and the budget still isn't finalized. So stay tuned. We'll find out what happens next. In addition, the Basic Education Funding Commission has completed its listening tour of Pennsylvania and is currently working on writing its report that will be issued on January 11th, 2024. As a reminder, the Basic Ed Funding Commission is charged with reviewing the distribution of state funding for basic education to Pennsylvania's 500 school districts and providing a report of its findings to the General Assembly. Education advocates are pushing for the BEF to find adequacy targets for all 500 school districts. They're pushing for money specifically for pre-K special education facilities and transportation, a set state share target, and a reasonable timeline to fix the funding inadequacies laid out by the Commonwealth Court ruling back in January of 2023. Of course, I'll have a big update for you all on our January 22nd, 2024 meeting after the report drops. So we'll find out more then. That's all I have for legislative update. Gretchen and or Peter, do you have any updates from the COG?
I do not. Peter?
Yeah, I have one. Jim May, retired just this last week, and he finished his 14th year as the director of the Center Region Planning Agency. He's responsible for a number of things that affected everyone's daily life in the Center Region for years, but remained invisible, as it often does with planners. But it was a lovely event to go to with people from across his term at the Center Region Planning Agency there to celebrate his retirement. So there will be a new person arriving, I believe next week, who as the head of the planning agency coming from Brighton, Colorado. I just can't remember his name offhand.
Excellent. All right, thanks for that update, Peter. All right, now as Ms. Yoder alluded to, we have quite the set of board members for whom this is their last board meeting. And I want to take a few minutes and highlight some of the work that Dan Duffy, Laurel Zidney, and Jim Leos engaged in while on the board. In a little bit of the tradition of this is your life, this is your life on the SCASD board. And if you'll direct your attention to the screen, you'll see some memories as we talk. So it was 2009 when Jim was elected to the board. And in 2010, groundbreaking took place for the new Mount Nittany Elementary School and the renovated Ferguson Township Elementary School. In 2011, Laurel was elected to the board, and Jim became vice president for a year-long stint. In 2012, the board hired Superintendent Bob O'Donnell. In 2013, the district launched an extensive community outreach effort to campaign for a referendum to borrow $85 million for the State High project. In 2014, district residents overwhelmingly approved the referendum, only the second successful referendum for a school construction project in state history. In 2014, Jim started a second stint as vice president, this time for 4 years. In 2015, Dan joined the board. Also in that's a great picture, Jim.
Love that picture. That's great. Running with scissors.
That's right. Also in 2015, the State High site work and construction begins on the $141 million State High project, and the district launches the SCASD Education Foundation. In 2017, the board approves the district's first school climate inclusive excellence policy. In 2018, The board approves new elementary and secondary days, starting elementary schools a half hour earlier and secondary schools later. As part of the revised elementary day, the district launched a K-5 STEM curriculum for a 5th weekly special period. In 2018, the board approves hiring the district's first director of equity and inclusivity. In 2019, as an official International Baccalaureate World School, State High begins its IB program. And the district finishes renovating Radio Park and Coral Street Elementary Schools and building Spring Creek Elementary, which replaces the Hauserville and Lamont schools. It also completes the new State High campus, including a new Delta program building and the North Field. Dedication ceremonies are held for each building. In 2020, the district finished a $14 million Memorial Field renovation and approves an anti-racism resolution. In 2021, the board approves 2 new policies that call for ensuring the safety, comfort, and healthy development of gender-expansive and transgendered students. In addition, Jim steps off the board to run for State College mayor, but don't worry, he returns in 2023 to fill Amber Concepcion's vacated seat. In 2022, the board approves aligning middle school grade schedules so 6th graders have better learning experiences. Also, the board approves new physical plant building and north building renovation construction. And finally, this year in 2023, the board approves Curtis Johnson as the superintendent of the district. And we have also approved a Mount Nittany Elementary expansion to accommodate increased enrollment. The district as it stands today is far from the district that existed when Jim was elected, or the district when Laurel was elected, and it's seen significant change since the time Dan was elected. These changes have grown SCASD to a top-ranked district in the state of Pennsylvania. The breadth of the contributions of Laurel, Dan, and Jim are enormous, and as we enter the season of giving thanks, the board wants to ensure we express our thanks for their years of dedicated service. Dan spent his first career working as a school psychologist. And then after that career, he decided he hadn't had enough and came to serve SCASD as a board member. It is widely understood that having a member of the board who has worked in public ed is an advantage to any school board. And Dr. Duffy is an excellent example of this. Past board president Amber Concepcion says, Dan has often worked to make sure the board appreciates the implications of our decisions. He is good at calling our attention to how those who work with students every day may be tasked with implementing any program. I was lucky enough to serve with Dan on the Central Intermediate Unit 10 Board of Directors, where he was president for 3 years. His work on that public board built an IU that is undeniably stronger today than it was when he attended his first board meeting. Francine Endler, the current executive director of the CIU 10, writes, Dan was an important part of the work to seek a new permanent location for CIU 10 administrative offices. He led the board during COVID-19 and provided strong and consistent guidance. Dr. Endler continues, Dr. Duffy's thoughtful and purposeful leadership resonated in his work on the CIU 10 board. We are grateful for his years of service and support and wish him well on his next endeavors. Dan, I've really enjoyed our conversations and your ability to listen, converse, and consider together. On a personal note, I appreciate the time you took to help me understand my role on the board. We are certain that you will continue to do great things beyond this boardroom, and we wish you well. Thank you so much, Dan.
Jackie, thank you so much, and thanks to everyone. You know, thanks to Amber, thanks to everyone who contributed to that. This is like retiring all over again. People start saying all these nice things about you that you never imagined, you know. So I appreciate the feedback. Thank you very much.
All the thanks to, well, I'm sorry.
I wanted to thank Lynn too for her special attention and care to all the members of the board, but particularly to me in this transition. Thank you.
All the thanks to you, Dan. Thank you. Laurel. Laurel truly has given so much time and energy to her duties as a board member. I want to acknowledge that Laurel's service to education began well before she was even elected to the SCASD board. She's been involved in schoolwork and initiatives for decades. taking up the work of advocating for academic excellence in various districts as life took her to different corners of the country. She's been very involved in community outreach and interfacing with the community. Several board members and others have had the opportunity to be on the receiving end of Laurel's hospitality. Laurel is always open to discussion and conversation. She listens and contributes with an attentiveness and focus that often seems in short supply during our very busy society. As former board president Amber Concepcion put it, you guys are going to figure out I talked to her a lot while I was writing these. Laurel has an enthusiasm for learning new things and really embodies what it means to be a lifelong learner. She really believes in public schools as a democratic institution in which the whole community has a stake and should help shape priorities. Laurel, thank you for your service to the board, and we wish you well in all things that come next.
I wanted to say a couple things, and I wrote them down so I didn't go on for half an hour. It really has been a tremendous honor to serve on this board. And all the support we've gotten and encouragement from the entire State College community, there will never be a feeling like there was after that referendum passed with every single precinct voting for it. I've done my best to represent the community and their views and everything I've done, and really just appreciate their support. When I joined the board in 2011, my son was at Easterly Park, and he's now a senior at Penn State. So my time at K-12 is sort of coming to an end after beginning in 1990 when my oldest started kindergarten. I've had the pleasure of seeing the district construct the new high school, the very strong support of our community. I've worked to listen to our students, parents, faculty, administration, and trying to reach consensus on the numerous challenges that face our district. I also wanted to say thank you to Lynn as well as to the absent Curtis, including for the gifts that you got for us as going away gifts, which I'm going to enjoy snuggling in. So thank you very much for your support and for finding the forms that I lose. And we have to file annual reports and I can never find them. And although I'll be stepping down from the board, I look forward to continuing to engage with the district in whatever ways I can to support our schools and our community.
Thank you so much, Laurel. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Jackie.
It's incredibly easy to find people who want to say lovely things about Jim Leos. Everyone on the board is grateful for his willingness to reprise his role as a board member after Amber Concepcion accepted another local government position. As individual members of the school board, we are all very passionate about education, including Jim. But Jim also always approaches the work with such grace and steadiness. You may have noticed that no one on the dais ever holds their breath when Jim is talking. We know any comment he makes will be full of reason, meaning, and calmness in a way that will advance the conversation towards resolution. Perhaps another way to say this is that Jim is really, really good at adulting. For sure, Jim's contribution to the board were never about him. Past board president Amber Concepcion recently said to me that Jim always puts the best interest of the students first and has worked for years to ensure we have an excellent district where every kid can find interests that keep them engaged in our school community. It's clear to me and everyone up here that the students in our community are better for Jim's work. SCASD is so lucky to have Jim working on the board, and we wish him well. We look forward to your ongoing engagement with the district in other roles. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks a lot. This is interesting. Thanks to the other 8 members of this board for selecting me to replace Amber for a short little stint. The last 9 months have been a rewarding experience, although I would admit that they weren't as interesting as the previous 12 years. You made a great choice for superintendent, and I think we've got a bright future in the school district, and I intend to stay involved. I wish you and the 3 new board members coming on luck. and fortitude and wisdom going forward. Laurel and Dan, it has been a pleasure serving with you. And, you know, we were friends before and we'll be friends after the school board service is over. And Lynn and Mary Jen kept me straight for all these years. So I really appreciate all your help. I appreciate CJ and Bob O'Donnell's help. And I want to say thank you and so long for now.
All right, thank you everyone for that. Now we'll get back to the agenda. All right, so up next, we have public comments. There it is. All right, each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by the Sunshine Act. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. As a reminder, public comment is a chance for community members to share their thoughts with the board. It is not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversation. You can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. Please note, and this is apart from my usual blurb about public comment, that we are providing an additional opportunity for public comment this evening after the Delta Program Committee update under information items. If you are able to stay for that agenda item, we would ask that you hold your comments until that time. But for those who are unable to stay, you're more than welcome to make your comments now. Just hold to make sure that we have a podium available. But is there anyone here who would like to make a public comment in person? All right. Is there anyone online attending virtually who would like to make a public comment at this time? You can let me know you'd like to make a public comment by raising your hand using the raise hand button in the bottom center of your screen. All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Next on the agenda, we have routine approvals. Is there a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Ms. Zindi.
I do have a question, and it relates to the IT routine approvals and the approval of Imagine Learning. I just wanted to check this. We seem to be doing this every 6 months or so, and I'm assuming that's because it's a semester by semester thing. So I was wanting to check that and ask if this is, the renewal is for the coming semester or the current semester.
Are you referring to item 5E?
Yes,
Okay.
at the it's the last item on there.
Justin, are you able to answer?
And that would make sense, and I guess the only follow-up to that is that at some point, I hope the board will look again at what we're using for our virtual academy. So that's why I wanted to specifically check on that now. So maybe before 6 months from now.
Okay.
So, thanks.
All right,
Thank you,
thank you.
Jess.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Krefkor.
This is on 5C, and it was just when I was looking at it, it was just a little curious about the travels. It's wonderful that the kids are experiencing such wonderful field trips and tournaments. But the last one, the music one, there's no student cost. Is there a reason for that? Like, how is that allocated by any chance?
What's close by?
It's for our chorus and band groups. the after-school activity, the after-school clubs.
So they don't pay, they're not required to for these trips?
So or are you asking about because student cost is at
Yeah,
zero?
exactly. And I just kind of was wondering, the district cost varies between a lot of these things. And is there like a formula, like how much the district pays for these things?
I'm not aware of that. I can check out and find out.
Okay, like I said, I was just looking through all this, and I think that it's wonderful that, the kids are experiencing all these wonderful trips. And I was just wanting to know, is there a formula or how it's allocated?
Carlene, with district, regional, state choirs, it's very much, I would say, comparable to a sport. So they try out, they are accepted into a district, so where the districts come together, it's like a select group that qualifies, so they have to be like nominated, and normally there is not a cost for them to attend because they are awarded that they qualified for an above and beyond program.
I see. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much. Are there any other questions or discussion on the routine approvals? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Kravicore? Yes. Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to the action items. Agenda item 6A is a motion to approve an agreement with Ag 93 Administration. This is shown in attachment 6A.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussions? All right, seeing none, I'm sorry, is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Kravicore?
Yes.
Agenda item 6B is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 Management's Discussion and Analysis. This is shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Kravicore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item.
Jackie,
Oh, I'm so
I
sorry.
think the next step then is a finance committee meeting, finance and audit committee meeting on the 29th. Does that get that right? To talk to the auditors. So that was the last thing that needed to be approved before we did that.
Yeah, and that is listed under future meetings for November 29th, so you got the date right. Good job.
Okay.
All right, agenda item 6C is a motion to approve a new career and technology program for aspiring educators.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments or discussion?
Yay.
Is there any public comment on this action item? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Kravicore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes. All right, motion carries. Agenda item 6D is a motion to approve a new student information system with PowerSchool. This is shown in attachment 6D.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Dr. Buck?
Yeah. This is just a pin to put down that when we get to the discussion about Delta and when we start talking about all the different kinds of data related to Delta that have been part of the program school conversation, so much of that has been about data. I would love to have make sure that we're looking at and staying attuned to how this system can be better than Synergy and what the ramifications of that are for whatever decision comes down. Okay?
Sure.
Or before us. Great.
Any other questions or discussion? Oh, Dr. Duffy, go ahead.
A quick comment. I'm anticipating, well, let me back up a bit. I appreciate the detail provided in the supporting documents regarding this decision. And the fact, and what it becomes clear, it comes through to me at least, is that there was, not to in any way understate the work that was done before, but there was a lot of work given to evaluating this particular system, comparing the use of this system by other high-performing school districts and our cohort districts, so to speak. So, and through all that study, I hope that this system has legs. I hope that this can continue at least 2 to 4, maybe 6 years before it has to be reevaluated in some significant way. I just am looking forward to there being a system that once it's learned, people can make that part of their repertoire and not have to go back and relearn something every 2 or 3 years. So I think there's real opportunity in all this. I'm looking forward to that taking place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to say, too, that we, like I told my former colleagues at work, we collect all kinds of data, but we use these systems to try and make a difference, interpreting that data and turning it into meaningful information, policy, and changes. So I hope that it can serve this purpose.
Ms. Zidney.
I'm going to echo those comments, and especially Peter's about Delta, because it seems to me that the whole point of having technology like this is to be able to get the data we need, as opposed to saying, well, we've got to structure things to meet the data or to meet the student information system. We want the student information system to work on behalf of what we want to do for students. And if that has problems happening, as Dr. Duffy said, we want it to have legs and last longer, but if for some reason it's not working, there's still paper and pencil or whatever other tools to actually gather data about people and to understand them. And I think we sometimes forget that that's always out there as an option. Though it's hard in a district this size, we can do it. And I'm going to urge also, again, that the board get periodic updates on how the implementation is going.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? All right, is there any public comment on this action item, either here or virtually? Yes, if you'd like to come to the podium and state your name, tell us where you reside in the district, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Norris. I'm a parent of 2 6th graders at the Delta program. I just have a question, actually. Is Power School, is that what it's
That's
called?
the correct, yep.
Replacing Synergy, is that correct, in total or in part? And what is the anticipated date of rollout? That's all I have.
I'm going to let Justin answer. Justin, would you mind coming up here?
So Power School will replace Synergy in total. The goal for that is it's going to solve a lot of problems that we've had with Synergy related to parent attendance emails, grades, notifications, and things like that. The timeline at this point, pending board approval tonight, we would send out communications and start on training. This would be for next school year, not a mid-school year shift. So it would be for the upcoming school year.
Okay. Thank you for that info. Appreciate it. All right, is there any other public comment on this action item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecoeur.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6E is a motion to approve a dual enrollment agreement with Penn Highlands. This is shown in attachment 6E.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
A question.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Cravagore. You're fine.
Answer Chris. Right. As we mentioned before when this was brought up, this is fantastic, and I really am happy that this is being offered. The only question I have, and I don't know if you'll have the answer to that yet, do we know how many teachers from Stay High are interested in doing this? And do we have any idea of the courses, just in case some kids want to think ahead and plan ahead?
So we haven't gone that far yet. We were seeking board approval with the agreement, and then we would look to see for next year, when the scheduling process starts to happen, which of the courses, which of the instructors of the courses meet the requirements. So the instructors must possess a master's degree.
Right.
So we can't really pick the course before we know who's teaching it. We could say we want it to be a certain course, but then if that teacher doesn't have a master's degree, they would not be eligible for this credit.
Do we know how many teachers are interested in doing
Oh,
this?
interested? I have not surveyed the teachers. I do know how many have master's degrees, and I know informally I've spoken to teachers who are very excited about this option for kids. So, but no, we haven't gone as far as to match up. I think we'll probably start with a smaller rollout to see, how that goes.
Okay.
Dr. Anderson.
Carlene asked my questions, so I think I'm good. Thanks.
Ms. Indy.
Yeah, I'm also excited to see this. I think it's a great opportunity for our students. And I want to call attention to the costs, and that the families will be paying the tuition, but that we're going to be looking for ways to help cover that, at least for students who are of lower economic ability to pay. Not to belabor a point, but we did approve the AP tests, and one of the paying for one of those, and part of the reason is the credit that students can get at many colleges for those. This is more expensive than an AP test, but it has the other advantage that it actually involves direct learning as opposed to just testing whether kids have learned. So I think if the district can find a way, possibly working with the foundation, setting up a fund, whatever, that would be such a service to our students, and perhaps get a different cohort of students who may not consider themselves AP and may not be looking at college that way, but suddenly there's a topic that's interesting, and it's a way to do it in a very comfortable setting and really give them a good head start. So I think it's great that we've finally got this, and thank you for all your work on it. I know from talking with you and Jonathan that it was a lot of work to find something and get it and going.
Stephen, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so I'd just like to know, is it more aimed at like STEM and math or social sciences, or is it trying
It's
to
going to
be
be a smattering of lots of different courses.
Okay, because just from what I've seen, most people who take college courses tend to do it in math, and so I'm just like wondering if there'll be other alternative options.
There will be, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's our hope that students would be able to take a lot of, not a lot, some, or as many as they would like, gen ed kind of credits in high school, so that when they go into their program, a lot of colleges want students to take program-specific courses at that college. So, but this would be a way for them to be able to earn credit for some gen eds, and therefore reduce the overall bill. After having two who went through college, that would have been welcome. So, yeah.
Are there any other questions or discussion from the board? Is there any public comment on this action item? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Cravagore. Yes. Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6F is a motion to approve a change order for the North Building renovation project. This is shown in attachment 6F.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussions? Dr. Anderson.
I just had one question. I was curious how long we expect the lead paint abatement to last, right? Like in the memo, there was a conversation about, if we removed it entirely, that would take care of it for good, but that's cost prohibitive. So is this encapsulating, like, is that going to degrade over time? And 15 years from now, we're going to have to do this again, or?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, if the space gets renovated in 50 years, we may have to deal with it again.
Okay.
But no.
But we wouldn't anticipate an issue until perhaps another renovation?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Zidney.
And I think my question is similar from the other angle. Yes, it's more expensive to replace the whole roof, but when is the expectation that we would have to replace that roof anyway?
Another 50 years.
Okay,
So
so
we're-
it's a similar, so I was looking at it from both sides. If it's going to be in 10 years, then we may as well bite the bullet now.
We're replacing the actual membrane, the roof membrane insulation as part of the project. It's the actual decking that never sees any weather. So other than the paint that's on it, it's in good shape.
Thanks.
Any other info, any other discussion or comment? Is there any public comment on this action item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney. Yes. Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6G is a motion to approve a new policy 000, Board Policy Procedure Administrative Regulations. This is shown in attachment 6G.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Is there any question or discussion on this policy about policy?
I always thought 009 was the policy.
We have multiple policies on policies. Why not? All right. This one went through info discussion, and we discussed it quite a bit then. So if seeing no discussion at the table, is there any public comment on this action item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney. Yes. Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. You're distracting.
Sorry, we're being disruptive over here.
So that motion carried. Agenda item 6H is a motion to approve revisions to policy 137, home education programs. This is shown in attachment 6H.
So move.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6I is a motion to approve a new policy 142, migrant students. This is shown in attachment 6I.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this action item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6J is a motion to approve revisions to policy 202, eligibility of non-resident students. This is shown in attachment 6J.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6K is a motion to approve revisions to policy 208, withdrawal from school. This is shown in attachment 6K.
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy? Ms. Huff?
Yes. Motion carries. Ms. Pierce, thank you for coming to the table. We'll see you again later.
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, we did postpone policy 903 at the beginning of this meeting. So that takes us to information reports. Dr. Bucher and Ms. Merritt are with us to provide an overview of the 2024-25 proposed school calendar. Or just Dr. Bucher.
All right. So in accordance with policy 803, we're presenting the proposal for the district calendar for the 24-25 school year. And for your consideration tonight. So in preparing this calendar, the calendar committee weighed many factors that involved to identify a school calendar that provides the most optimal dates for both student attendance and engagement. The proposed calendar has had input from 19 members of the committee, which helped us ensure that Department of Education requirements, local contractual obligations, as well as incorporating 44 elements needed to create a functional calendar were incorporated. The key thing from this calendar, different from this current school year, is we believe having the first day of school after the commencement of Penn State's classes on August 26th provides 4 vital benefits to our students, families, and schools. Our first student day falls after the Grange Fair, which ends on August 24th in this proposal. Aligning with this, Penn State's fall semester allows Penn State's international students time to enroll their children in our district, resulting in students being able to participate in establishing foundational classroom norms and routines, which occur within the first few weeks of the school year. Third, gives our schools a better opportunity to be fully staffed prior to students arriving. Provides additional in-service opportunities as we transition to Power School. Additional key points from the proposed calendar. The first student day is Tuesday, October 27th. The last student day, June 5th. Winter break starts December 23rd and runs through January 1. One snow makeup day is scheduled within the school year, and 4 additional days are scheduled after the tentative last day of school. Additionally, SCASD may request FID days or flexible instructional days from the Department of Education, which could be used if necessary following the additional 5 snow days. On the following dates, students will not have school to avoid excessive testing and class assignments. Rosh Hashanah, Thursday, October 3rd, which starting at sundown. Eid on Monday, March 31. Good Friday, Friday, April 18th. The 3-hour early release days for Act 80 professional development will be on Veterans Day, November 11th, and President's Day, February 17th. The district will be surveying families and staff for feedback on these dates, either being early dismissals or delayed starts. Once the feedback is collected, administration will present an update to the board in February 2024. Spring break is scheduled for the week of March 10th through the 14th, which does align with Penn State. State High's graduation is June 6th, with rain dates of Saturday, June 7th, and Sunday, June 8th. They are the key elements of the proposed calendar.
So just to be clear, the November 11th and February 17th the schedule for those are not set in stone at this point. So considering that we're kind of living this 3-hour delay this year, we're going to see how that goes and then come back after surveying how it went for everyone.
Correct.
And kind of decide, will we have a 3-hour delay or a 3-hour early dismissal?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, this year, we're currently doing 3-hour delays. I think in the past, we've done 3-hour early dismissals.
Yeah, I
this is
think
our
in the
first
past
year.
we didn't have part days. Yeah, in the way past.
That's why it's a trial, first year.
Okay.
Yeah. 12 years. Yeah. And it's also my understanding that, like, the potential conflict between Grange and the start of the school year is we're kind of getting like for this year and the next year, there won't be overlap between those two, but that it could potentially become a problem in the future again.
Yeah.
It could be possibly in 2 years, depending on how those dates are rolled out.
Okay. All right. Well, this is great. It's so great that they can have this time to go to the Grange. I think that's fantastic. So.
And having looked at this before, it seems it's on a 5-2 schedule. In other words, there are 2 years where there's no real conflict with the Grange, but in the remaining 5 years there are. And so we've had to reconcile participation in the Grange, giving our kids those opportunities, and which is aligned also with, in some respects, the CTC program. But to be able to have that during that week, but this year and perhaps next year, I think, if things continue to be, the Grange continues to schedule as they have been, we'll likely not have conflict in the coming year.
It's great. Dr. Bader.
I just wanted to point out, because when I first read the religious holidays that happened to be off, I was like, wait a minute. But for anybody that's just perusing, Yom Kippur actually falls on the weekend this year, so that was why it doesn't fall on that list. So,
yeah,
as we've given that in the past, so it wasn't neglected.
Ms. Indy.
And a couple of questions. One is in August, the 20th and 21st of August. So it says in-service for staff, and then the 22nd and 23rd says in-service half-day, Act 80 half-day. Is the staff, does that include teachers?
Great question. So the 16th and 19th are for new teachers to the district, as well as their mentors. The 20th through the 23rd are just how we allocate the use of those days for teacher in-service. We're adding an additional day, anticipating for the rollout of Power School. So it's really just whether they're going to be doing professional development or class time in their classroom or presentations, just how we actually allocate those days.
But they have to end their vacation by the 20th. So they will be in school, they will be working those days.
The staff will be fully back
All
on the
staff,
20th,
okay.
correct.
And then I also wanted to ask, with the religious holidays, if we have either Jewish or Muslim teachers or other staff, can they still take those days? Because they're in school those days, can they take them as a religious holiday?
Yes.
They can still do that, because it's good to have the students off. And I have a concern about having Martin Luther King Day as a teacher day, because I think when we made the move to make it a student day off, part of the idea was that hopefully many of our students and their families would do things in the spirit of Martin Luther King on that day, and I think that's a good opportunity for teachers as well, and I hope at least if they're in school that that's part of the consideration of what they're working on that day, because they can't be with their families.
So I've not experienced one yet, but my understanding is that's what we've done in the past and this year as well, as we focus on that spirit of what MLK represented.
Right.
Yeah, I think in previous years they've had, I think last year there was a speaker, the morning was a block with a speaker, particularly about equity issues and other pertinent topics.
Yeah, just there's so much to cover. I didn't want that to get lost in there.
Thank you.
And then, go ahead. I had something else, but I have to figure out what I wrote here.
All right, we can come back to you. That's fine. Does anyone else have a comment or question? Well, we might come back to you right away. So.
Yes, and I figured it out. The other comment about the Grange Fair is that the other difference used to be that Penn State started later, because Penn State had committed for something like 10 years to not start till after Labor Day. When they changed that, and then we were trying to keep, that's part of what created the problem. So if we could convince Penn State to start later. I really appreciated your memo and listing out those 4 different reasons. That I think really makes the case for why it's beneficial to start after then.
Stephen.
So I'm just looking at the document, and you have 44 very impressive reasons. Is one of them having a flow in terms of the school year? Because I know I've seen teachers and students alike both be confused by the amount of school we've been missing. Like, there's been the impression that it's been hard to get in a rhythm with school when you keep having extra holidays or extra 3-hour delays, and just it's been noticed people have thought that they were off their game or not able to do as well in school with all the different variation?
Sure, great question. So the committee spent a considerable amount of time trying to balance what we get the most attendance for students as well as for the families in the district. So if we had an option to do a 3-day weekend versus a random day off on a Tuesday or Wednesday in the middle of the week, we would try to have the 3-day weekend so you could get away or do some things with the family. So that was one of the things we tried to balance as far as the flow. And some days, what's challenging is we have trimesters in elementary and we have quarters in high school, secondary. So having records days and report cards for elementary as well as secondary, that sometimes is a challenge to balance all those needs.
And yeah, just back to the Penn State schedule for a second. Like, so just, I feel like I need to explain this all the time when it comes up, but so the Penn State calendar is glued to Thanksgiving because they always want students to come back after Thanksgiving, have an additional 2 weeks of class, and then finals. So that is like their anchor. Whereas Grange Fair is anchored to Labor Day. So depending on where Labor Day is in relationship with Thanksgiving, that's what causes the conflict or not the conflict. And yeah, I would love it if we could all get together for sure, but at least that's an explanation of why it is the way it is.
I think when they started later, they didn't give the full week off for Thanksgiving.
And part of me wishes that we would have an earlier fall break at Penn State along with a Thanksgiving break.
I mean, it is hard to balance everything.
Yes. So, as a wise person once told me, calendar discussions end well if everyone's just a little upset about something. So, but I do, I sat on the calendar committee and I really appreciate your leadership as well as the willingness of everyone who came to work with a lot of really good discussions and trying to balance everything out. Are there any other questions about this proposed calendar? Jim, you don't want to weigh in on the calendar one more time?
No, this is a fraught subject. And thanks for taking my duty for the calendar committee. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Jim said no, thank you. No, he was busy. Okay, are we good to move on from this one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think it looks good. No major concerns.
Thank you.
All right. Feels good. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Bucher. I lost my spot. Here we go. Dr. Downs and Dr. Bucher will now provide an update on the work of the Delta Program Committee. Welcome, Dr. Downs. You beat me to the stage.
All right. Thank you. So the Delta Committee has been meeting. We've met twice so far. So tonight, John, as I learned at Delta, you go by first names. So I'm Jonathan. This is John. You can do this if you agree. So we had 2 meetings so far, and really what the purpose of the committees, what we're going to be reporting out tonight, is the questions that were asked from various PTSO meetings, from students, from the committee members, from parents that emailed questions. So we were trying to turn over every possible rock to answer any of the questions that came up. So what we're presenting is a little lengthy, but we hope it's informative. So John and I will be taking turns this evening. So this, just to clarify, we did have a committee meeting, our 3rd committee meeting last Thursday. This is not an update of that meeting. This is just an update of the prior to that. So the purpose of the committee is to discuss with students, faculty, and parents and other stakeholders the possible implications of transitioning Delta program to a school. So what is the end goal? What we gain from doing this is really just the questions, and I'll be going Q&A that we got and we tried to answer. So our goal, I lost my spot, apologize. Our goal is to continuously improve as a district while providing equitable opportunities for all students. Separating Delta students from Park Forest, Mount Nittany, and State High would cement Delta's identity and provide the district with clearly defined and comparable schools. This would strengthen Delta and other schools and help school leaders and teachers make better decisions and provide the best outcomes for their students. Additionally, a school status would dramatically increase Delta's visibility into new families, assisting them with making informed decisions about school options for their children. This would be a more equitable and transparent approach, as Delta would be listed side by side with all our schools. Next question, is it more sustainable in the long run for Delta to be a program or a school? In the long term, it could be more sustainable since a program could be ended much more easily than closing a school. According to School Code, Article 7 outlines the process to close a school, which requires a public hearing with the school board prior to any school closing. Related to the process of the committee, what does this decision-making process look like at each level? So at the committee level, we are sharing questions, collects information, studies and reviews information and data, and discusses and justifies recommendations. The committee then shares recommendations and findings with the superintendent. The superintendent on the second level reviews recommendations and studies supporting data and resources. The superintendent makes a recommendation to the school board that would include a summary of the committee's findings. And the third, the school board analyzes and studies the recommendation and findings. The school board makes a decision by balancing what is best for Delta and the district as a whole. There's a list in the attachment of the 19 committee members. In the interest of time, I won't read each one, but it's a combination of Delta students, Delta parents, Delta faculty, administration, and school board members.
Curriculum, some questions about curriculum. Does Delta's curriculum selection and delivery process need to change if teachers are meeting state/national standards identified for their subject area? No. In all Pennsylvania public schools, all teachers are required to teach the state standards. It has always been at Delta. Teachers may continue to collaborate with students to identify course topics that meet the standards for each subject area. For just FYI, currently teachers at Delta are all crosswalking their curriculum. The classes they teach with the state standards as outlined in our district-approved curriculum. Would Delta students be able to take state classes at State High still? Yes. If Delta students took AP or IB courses at State High, could the data in Synergy be attributed back to Delta? Yes.
Regarding graduation and college admissions, could Delta benefit from determining its own graduation requirements, giving Delta flexibility rather than being tied to State High's requirements? This could be accomplished via the democratic process and with school board approval. Could Delta be able to create its own diploma? Yes, this could be accomplished via the democratic process and school board approval. Could Delta have its own graduation ceremony? This could be a possibility, but it was sensed that this was not necessarily desired by the students on the committee. Are graduation rates at Delta higher than State High? They are very comparable. What is the impact on the school profile for college applications? Since the majority of our students attend Penn State, we went directly to Penn State's admissions office, and they shared that it does not put an emphasis on the school's overall profile, rather the courses that the student takes and how well they perform in said courses. And that's what Penn State focuses on, their attention to the admission process. As a school, Delta would follow a similar process as before, in which the school counselor provides a supplement to each transcript sent out explaining what Delta entails, and that's currently happening. Sports. Would Delta students be able to participate in sports and activities at State High? Yes. According to PIAA Constitution and Bylaws, Article 3, Section 5, students in a magnet alternative school or like, where the school does not offer or sponsor any PIAA sports teams, are afforded the opportunity to participate in their home district and PIAA sports. They're automatically eligible to participate, and in the handout we cite the article, Section 5. Would playoffs be jeopardized for SCASD teams? No. If Delta program is identified as a magnet school within SCASD, there would be no change in the athletic structures or interference with playoffs. Regarding eligibility, the athletic office would still monitor academic progress and grades and this information is as per the Chief Operating Officer, Mark Byers of the PIAA. If we combine sports teams at the middle school level, do we have to petition the PIAA every year to do this? There was a thought that we were already doing this with our Mount Nittany and Park Forest middle school football teams. we learned that is not happening, and it's not something we need to do. So the answer is no.
Regarding data, would Delta students still have to take the PSSA and Keystones? Yes, they are required by state and federal governments. Did Delta numbers for PSSA/Keystone opt-outs cause the other school buildings to write plans? No. What schools completed improvement plans for PDE in the last few years? Since the improvement plan process was implemented in the last few years, State High has been the only school asked to write a plan, but only for English language learner students. What is the PSSA/Keystone threshold that triggers a school to write an improvement plan? Less than 95% school-wide participation is the threshold. What is an improvement plan for PSSA/Keystone opt-outs? It's simply a three questions/items that we need to respond to PDE. So if Delta were to become a school and didn't meet the participation threshold, we could have to respond to these questions. 1, provide a narrative that analyzes the root cause or causes for participation falling below the 95% threshold. Provide an action plan detailing strategies in which the school will engage to increase participation in the upcoming school year. And 3, provide a timeline for the implementation of each strategy. Could you please break down the actual numbers of how a group of 40 students opting out might impact a larger building? For example, Park Forest Middle School has 728 students, not including Delta students. For the school to meet the minimum 95% PSSA test-taking threshold, at least 692 students would have to take the PSSAs. Therefore, if 40 students opted out and reduced the number of test takers to 688, Park Forest Middle School would need to write an improvement plan. If we have clear test results that are not what we wish them to be, how would that impact the teaching? All school buildings, including Delta, develop targeted building goals as part of the district strategic planning process. This process helps identify areas for improvement and is an essential step toward getting better for all of our schools and the district. Test results would allow us to recognize strengths and areas for improvement across the major academic areas and identify specific demographic groups that need academic support. This is an important component of our equity efforts. Utilizing this data would assist us in providing resources to teachers and support staff through targeted professional development and training, or identifying other resources that might be needed, such as other types of support staff.
Enrollment. What is the 23-24 Delta enrollment breakdown by sending school? 86 students zoned for Park Forest Middle School attend Delta, 50 students zoned for Mount Nittany Middle School attend Delta, and 176 students zoned for State High attend Delta. What is the enrollment for schools? For these schools, Park Forest has 728 students, Mount Nittany Middle 666, State High 2,214.
Would Delta's enrollment process change if it were to become a school? No, it would not necessarily change by Delta becoming a school or staying a program. We kind of says a separate conversation. How does SCASDA disseminate information about Delta to families? Historically, we have not actively provided information district-wide to Delta families transitioning into 6th and 9th grades other than the high school's curriculum showcase in January, which targets new, future, and current students and families. However, this year we did send a letter to all 5th grade families with information about the program, and so far have hosted 2 informational sessions for prospective students and their families. Families can find information from these resources. Delta Middle and Delta High both have channels on the drop-down menu on the school district website. We have a Delta program Facebook page. We have a YouTube video, Why We Do Love Delta, and a local realtor, KBB, promotes Delta on its website. Are families who are new to SCASDA told about the program during the enrollment process? No. However, if families ask about the Delta program during registration, they are given the information and offered a tour.
Regarding funding, would Delta or SCASI receive more or less state or federal funding? No change in outside funding would be anticipated. Would state or federal funding change based on a school versus program designation? No. Would the local funding of Delta be affected by switching to being its own school as compared to a program? No. How is Delta currently funded on a federal, state, and local level? In general, funds come in a per pupil basis to the district, which are distributed the funds in 3 different tiers. Tier 1, district-wide cost to all students. Tier 2, or second tier, Level-wide funding for schools, for example, all elementary schools would apply to all 8 elementaries. And school-specific funding like Delta or State High. Does Delta pool funds proportional to students that come from State High, Park Forest Middle, Mount Nittany Middle, similar to charter school funding? Yes, Delta, as with all schools in the district, is given an operational budget proportional to the number of students and their specific needs. What is the per student spending for 22-23 school year? That information is not available yet. However, the costs for 21-22 are linked there into the document. I believe that's a 30-plus page document if you'd like to read that. They're included. The numbers vary for a number of different reasons, such as salaries, teacher salaries, employee salaries, amount of students with special needs, the number of program offerings, and the student-to-teacher ratios. What is the per pupil spending at Park Forest Middle? It's $21,503. Mount Nittany Middle School, $22,037. State High, $20,022. And Delta is $20,106. How does the district invest in Delta? In January 2014, the school board supported the expansion of Delta into a middle school cohort. This resulted in adding an approximately 12 staff positions, adding in a second floor to the construction plan to provide space for Delta Middle. This resulted in Delta moving from the Fairmont building to the North Campus. Publicly viewable information. What are the rankings for each of Mount Nittany Middle, Park Forest Middle, and State High for any individualized test over the years? There are complete breakdown information about our schools available at the Future Ready PA Index. It's a pretty broad question, so we have a link there to the index. Does Delta have a comprehensive profile on popular sites such as niche.com, greatschools.org, U.S. News and World Report, and Future Ready Index, which new families, especially those interested in small schools, can explore for information? All 4 websites were searched and Delta was not listed. Are there popular websites that families can use to make informed decisions about schools? Future PA Ready Index is a collection of school progress measures related to school and student success. The index includes a range of assessments, on track and readiness indicators to more accurately report student learning, growth, and success in the classroom and beyond. Greatschools.org provides ratings and comparison tools based on student growth, college readiness, equity, and test scores for U.S. public schools. Zillow, the home buying application, uses greatschools.org to share information about schools in the community where a house is located. Niche.com provides school ranking data, and there's a link to what they're collecting, as well as U.S. News and World Report rankings and their data sources that they collect from.
Some miscellaneous questions. Would Delta students be transported to school any differently? No. Would Delta Middle still have recess? Yes. Would Delta students still have a component of community service? Yes. Does Delta need to change its name to be called a school? No. For example, Delta could be called Delta Academy or simply Delta. Do other Pennsylvania school districts have programs similar to Delta? There are many examples within Pennsylvania school districts that emphasize specific areas of study, such as magnet schools or a particular teaching method, though they do not follow the democratic process. Are there any comparable schools that are Delta's size and align with the democratic philosophy? Yes, Delta has a sister school in Ithaca, New York, Lehman Alternative Community School, which is a democratic alternative public combined middle and high school near Cornell University. The school serves students grades 6 to 12 with approximately 305 students enrolled. The Lehman School is fed by 2 middle schools and 1 high school and is ranked in the U.S. News and World Reports, greatschools.org, and niche.com.
That broadly concludes our update from the committee. Next steps is we'll be having a committee meeting in December, and we're looking to schedule one for January.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions or discussion from the board? Dr. Krefegor?
Yes. Do we know about how many students opt out now, like what the participation number is currently for the Delta student?
I believe, so Keystones, we don't have students opt out. That's a much different, we've lumped in Keystones and PSSAs, but they're two separate entities with a
Okay.
graduation requirement. So PSSAs, I think last year around 20%, but I can get those numbers historically for you. But approximately 20% of our kids opt out.
I see. The reason is that depending on how many students opt out, that you had mentioned something about a plan, making a plan. But if that's the ideology of a lot of the students, I'm not sure how this plan would be in effect.
Yeah, and that question was raised by the committee as well. Is it disingenuous to come up with a plan that we don't agree with? So, or not that we, that families don't agree with. But the plan, and Jonathan can speak more about that.
Yeah, so the opt-outs are primary for religious reasons. So we had the very healthy conversation about what the 3 items would be entailed in a plan. So there's 3 items listed there. So what is improvement plan? They're listed, provide a narrative, what's the root cause or cause for participation falling below the 95% threshold. An action plan detailing strategies in which the school engage increase participation and provide a timeline for that implementation. So we had talked about not being disingenuous to the plan, but if the plan would be required, that it would not, because it's based on religion, we would not be able to anticipate repercussions because of people choosing religious choice.
And would that affect any of the rankings of the schools at all?
So the 95% threshold, so it does change the formula for how our growth of the schools are done. So for example, if I gave the example of Park Forest, if they had 38 kids, I think that opted out, they'd have to write a plan. So every time that every student you go beyond 95%, that counts as a non-proficient score. So every kid that opts out after we get past that 5% threshold is basically saying that it counts as a student that pretty much didn't pass the assessment. So it's a non-take, but it does hurt. So right now, when those assessments are not taken, they're distributed to, if a kid's from Park Forest where they would normally attend, that goes against Park Forest.
Right, but if it's the school, Delta is their own school, how does that go against Delta?
It's the same way. So their growth would be based on how many students, if they meet the 95% threshold, is purely based on the growth, not having a negative aspect to it once they go below that 95%.
Okay.
We can come back to you if you have any questions later too.
Thank you.
Ms. Didney.
I wanted to clarify the numbers because it says, for example, Park Forest Middle School has 728 students, not including Delta students. But then down below, it gives the number, it appears that it does say Park Forest 728, and then above it, it says 86, I think, zoned for Park Forest. So is the actual number of kids counted for Park Forest the 86 plus the 728?
Yeah, I'm not going to be perfect on I pulled those numbers
not
at
to the
different
person,
times.
but
when
it's those two
enrollment-
squashed together.
Yes, they're connected because of the way that the data is attributed. So right now, if a student at Delta opts out, they may not be in Park Forest seats, but it counts towards Park Forest's 95% threshold.
Right, but if, say, the 38, suppose all 38 students who opted out happen to also be Delta students, then if the schools are separated, Park Forest looks like every single kid there takes the test, but Delta, which is smaller to begin with, suddenly says 38 students don't take it and therefore gets pushed into a plan. Is that a correct?
Correct.
That was my...
Yeah, sure.
When I think people are saying, well, maybe this is because people are concerned about plans, I think that's exactly what they're concerned about from the Delta perspective, that perhaps that'll make Delta look worse, like it's suddenly gotten much worse. So that was my concern about that. And then my other question was just the committee. How was it put together? Was it volunteers or were people selected?
So John, I think the committee was selected before I was employed with the district, and then we did add 3 board members and some administration.
Yeah, we took volunteers and randomly selected names.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Dr. Bader.
Thanks, guys, for that. And I am also on the committee. And so one of the most challenging discussions we've had thus far is about understanding what the challenges are with data. And I know Jonathan's worked really hard to explain a lot about the day-to-day tracking of data, but we've had a lot of questions about how does that interface with our system or our future system, and why are there challenges in terms of pulling that data in the current structure? And so I just wondered if perhaps our IT department might have some more information or a better way to explain why this is such a challenge and what the difference would be if Delta was identified as a school, what it would do to overcome that hurdle. Since I know our head of IT is here. Thanks, Justin.
Yep. I'm going to echo if you have both on. So specifically, the concern is related to like the Future Ready Index and how those students are represented. In that platform, they're pulling data from a bunch of different measures. So there's about 3 measures that Future Ready looks at, and they pull those off of 6 indicators, which some of those are state selected as far as there's attendance, graduation rates, and things of that nature. Those are also pulled from PIMS reporting categories, and the PIMS report is based off of the student information system. It pulls it out of the student state system, or the state identified school. So the difficulty with reporting on the Delta students in the nature of the Future Ready Index compared to what Future Ready does is there's about 500 data points that you get with the PIMS report, and there's about 40 or 50 state reports in Synergy or any student information system. The difficulty comes into those platforms, and the state are designed to ingest the data as far as the state reportable school, not a program or something like that. So if we were to try and break that data out on our own, there's nothing to validate that data against. So you could be making incorrect assumptions or goals based on that data because we don't have the accurate formulas or calculations that the state uses. Even for things like attendance, they don't do the straight ADM calculation that we are used to with some things. They will actually take that, and they actually have it in their documentation that will not match. Their attendance percentage does not match your ADM percentage because they calculate that on a different formula for the Future Ready.
For the public, can you define ADM?
I'll need
average daily membership, which is
Yeah.
kind of like an assessment of our attendance rate.
Yep.
Sorry.
You're good. No problem. Did that answer your question, or do you need more detail specifically?
Mostly kind of. I know when you talk about answering questions,
Yep.
and one thing as we've moved to a comprehensive planning process, which is required by the state, and then this is more a little bit maybe for John and Jonathan, as we've moved to, then we have individual building comprehensive plans, and those schools are setting goals. So we've seen some of those plans when we've toured some buildings in this past year, got to see kind of what each school is setting as a benchmark to look at. And I know most of our schools are trying to hone in on just a few specific areas, so they maybe have 2 or 3 goals. But the key is they're measurable goals. So the question I would have for you, John, is like, what are the kinds of things that Delta's focusing on as measurable goals, being that we have some of these challenges in accessing data thus far? Does that make sense, my question?
Yeah, and it's very similar to what other schools have, so I'll just run down quick is participation in activities, extracurriculars, co-curriculars, growth in math and ELA scores.
Is that through, what measure are you using for growth in ELA and MAP? And is it MAP at the middle
MAP,
level?
Keystones, and PSSAs.
Okay.
And meaningful engagement in career work standards, and implementation of PBI and examine and development of PBIS at Delta.
Okay.
Those are the
Thanks.
4.
That's helpful. So, I know as we talk about some of these plans, asking for measurable goals so we can determine how each building is doing gets us stuck with looking at data. So, thanks, that's helpful.
Dr. Book.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you guys very much for the report, and the people on the committee, and the Delta parents who are here, the Delta faculty. There's a lot of work that has already gone into this, and there will surely be more. I think there are a few things that are kind of looming around. And one of them that I think that the board will need to wrestle with is that the problem statement that we're looking at was not articulated by Delta. And the fact that the problem statement was not articulated by Delta, which is a democratic school, is facing us with a kind of a problem. Okay, and no one has said it so much in the room yet, but it is very, very present in the committee meeting and is present in a lot of, I would say, every single interaction I've had with a parent. And so whatever we're choosing to do, I really hope that we can be patient and really listen very well. Because, so this is part 2. So after having talked to a couple of teachers, one of whom is here, and I'm going to say Paul McCormick, okay, right, about, Delta's charter and its founding documents and all this, I was like, well, let's go get the materials for when, Delta was created as the alternative program. So I reached out to CJ and Lynn got me, there's these 50-year-old books back there, and they smell 50 years old, like, they really smell 50 years old, to see what created the school. And I've gotten to read a lot of them. I haven't been able to read every line of every page because there's hundreds of pages. But in 1972, the district set up a process where they engaged the Pennsylvania Department of Education and got some funding to initiate a study to create an alternative program that was based on, they recognized that there were lots of kids in the district in the 70s whose needs were, instructional and learning needs were not being met by the conventional school. And so they were like, well, maybe we'll have an alternative program. What would that look like? And so there are 3 reports, and the 3rd report has the recommendations for what became the alternative program. And a lot of those recommendations are still present. And I think that there are 4 that I think are really interesting that I want to share with you. I also, the documents will be scanned and made available, and hopefully definitely, I talked with Kim, okay, and they will definitely be available by December 6th, and hopefully by December 1st. So it includes the reports and votes by the board and et cetera, et cetera. So it says that the curriculum should be responsive to kids' needs and interests to keep them engaged, and that they would create their courses with teachers. And a lot of that, the interaction between Delta faculty and students is still a lot like that, which is one of the things that's great about it. The curriculum had 8 focus areas, and I'm not going to read them all, but they are still so Delta. So these 8 learning areas, I read them and I'm like, wow, that's still so present. And they're articulated differently from what we see at the conventional school, but it also says that we have to provide the instruction in all the areas that are mandated under state educational law. The equivalent of the clump leader, so if you're a Delta person, is basically there so that teacher, advisor, and student relationship is there. And then I think really importantly, the governance structure was designed for students, faculty, and staff to share decision-making power. And so this is in the original reports, right? 1972, 73, and 74, and that's still totally there. And certainly 4 of those things, members of the Delta community are really afraid that they're going to go away. They're afraid that the board and the administration are going to say, nope, you have to be like Park Forest, you have to be like Mount Nittany, you have to be like State High. And I personally do not want that to happen. I also think that no one on this board actually wants that to happen. But that fear is so present in every single conversation I've had. And I think that it's really important that whatever happens, whether it's a program or a school, that the board affirms the district's commitment to the culture, structure, governance, and curriculum of Delta. That's it. I think that would go a long way. I think that, I want to pay attention to that instead of being terrified of data. Yeah.
And also, for those who don't know, Dr. Buck was an alumni of Delta.
Yeah.
And also has a current student in Delta.
Yeah.
So when he speaks of Delta and what is so Delta, he is speaking from a position of knowing, just to be clear.
I love Delta. It made my life better, and so I feel very much like, I'm getting very emotional, pardon me, the teachers at Delta, when I was 16 and 17 years old, made my life better. I was going to drop out of high school. I wanted to drop out. And the people in that school kept me in school. And I want that for kids who are like me, who didn't have a home at the regular school. I don't need to go into all my problems or whatever, but they're considerable, obviously. But, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let Dr. Duffy go first.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just a reflection on the process that we're following. And I want to thank you, you as our participants, our presenters this evening, in providing probably the most rigorously disciplined presentation that I have ever witnessed as a board member in my 8 years, in terms of your attention to the detail and wanting to be in service to transparency. You're working really, really hard, that you're following through with the documentation that you have an earlier stage to some extent, but you are following through with a great deal of discipline and reporting out, and reflecting too, as Peter just mentioned, the need for a message that every member of the community can embrace and understand. They may not agree with all of the conclusions necessarily. They're still in the process of developing those conclusions. This is a democratic process you're going through. In a classic way, because I worked, speaking of history, my last 13 years working in the school district, I was assigned to Delta. I got to learn the curriculum and the program and how it was organized, and got to appreciate the democratic philosophy, if you will, that undergirds everything that takes place. But I just wanted to mention that your attention to detail and your explicit attention to the contents of the memo and the report, I think, is very important in terms of a way station along the way in terms of moving this process along. So I want to thank you for that.
Dr. Bader, and then Dr. Brand.
I just was going to add to what Peter said. I mean, I think that change is always difficult, and the unknown can be unsettling. And we've certainly seen that in the community. And I think that, you know, Peter and I both have students there, and Jim has had a student there, and Gretchen Brief had a student there at the middle level. So quite a number of us on the board have experienced what's great about Delta and what it's done for kids at certain stages of their life or certain needs that they're having. And so, yeah, I would just want to reiterate, I don't have any intent to change what's the core of Delta or what it provides students. I think it's a really important safeguard in our district and an important place for a lot of kids. And so, you know, I think part of asking these questions is, what are the tools do we need to help continue to make sure Delta is a great place and help make it better? At least that's how I look at it. So I just wanted to share that thought.
Ms. Brandt.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you know, just after listening to, well, I'm on the committee as well, so listening in the committee and listening here and listening at Delta PTO meetings and parents approaching me and teachers approaching me, Delta teachers approaching me, and just after doing a lot of listening, there's two things that really have stood out to me. One is like communication, and I think that there was not good communication at the onset of this discussion, and because of that, that led to an issue of trust. And so that's really what stands out in my mind, just that's why I chose to speak last too, just kind of summarizing how all of this has come to be at this moment here, where we're now starting to talk about, well, are we really here for the goal of making Delta better? And I do believe that that is the intent. It's part of the intent. But I also believe that there are Delta parents and teachers who will never believe that. And I understand that because of the communication part. And I just thought that I would share something that Mr. Johnson said to me when I first started to hear about this possibility of Delta becoming a school, which was long after conversations had already started, and I thought that was odd because I'm a board member and I didn't know about it. And so going back to the problem of communication, and when I started to hear about this, I did tell him, this is big. This is really big. And he said, oh, it's not because nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change at Delta. And so just going back to the communication part, that's really, I know that's what he was thinking because that's what he said. And I think that was a true statement. I think he was being honest when he said, oh, nothing, and that's what he thought. Oh, nothing's going to change if Delta becomes a school. And yet, a lot of and I can't speak for all, I haven't spoken to all, but many of all of the teachers and Delta parents I have talked to have believed the opposite of what he said, that making it a school will change it. And so I think that's why Peter's idea of, you know, whatever happens, whether it becomes a school, whether it stays a program, but of some kind of board resolution or some kind of formal communication from the board that that the intent is not to change Delta, and going back to the 4 components from the founding documents of Delta. And I think that's a great idea, because I think that really would bring into alignment that communication issue that really has been present, like I said, from the very beginning. I remember I made a motion to put this on a public agenda because it was not on any type of public agenda. So anybody in the public didn't even know this was being talked about. And so I don't think that was intentional. I really don't. And I know that there are Delta teachers and families who will, never believe that. I don't think it was intentional, but it was happening. And so all along, some of us have been trying to say, no, this needs this process that some of you have said, this is so thorough, we needed this, and I don't think that was really understood at the beginning, and that's what affected the trust. And as many of us say all the time, trust takes a long time to build and is broken in a moment. And that moment, that's when the trust was broken. And I'm only speaking for myself here, but I understand that feeling. And hopefully, just a little bit of the background on the communication and how that led to the trust issue. And then some of it's historical. I've also been told that by some Delta teachers, that this goes back way before this idea even came into being, that the trust issue, and just always being in fear that the school board is going to get rid of the Delta program. And so, as much as I don't like to say that out loud, because I don't want to start rumors, because I've never heard anybody here say that, but I have heard rumors out there. And so it just goes back again to the trust issue. So anyway, hopefully, like I said, no matter what the outcome is, it becomes a school, it doesn't become a school. But if that commitment can be made from the board, that the intent is not to change why Delta exists, the founding documents that Peter referred to, then hopefully at least a little bit of peace can come from that. And the fact that if it does become a school, which I have no idea if it will or not, but as is in the document, in the agenda item, it is a lot harder to close a school than a program. So just throwing that out there too. But anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Zindi, we'll come to you next.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who reads what is the end goal, it seems very clear that the end goal, with all the language around it, is make this a school. I can't put I'm not saying that's my goal or the board's goal, and I want to say that very definitely. This was not an initiative from the school board as a collective group. It wasn't. It was not talked about in private as a group. I became aware of it because a teacher reached out to me, and it was already well underway by that point. I also have just a factual question, and that regards the money, because another rumor has been, well, it's because Delta's expensive, and on here it certainly doesn't look that way. But I'm also curious about the middle, and I don't need an answer now, I'm just putting it out there. Usually high school students are considered more per student. That's part of why the funding formulas and the ADMs work the way they do, is that high school costs more to educate, and yet in this, the middle schools seem to be costing more. So that, to me, raises some questions that I think may be worth looking at again, because I absolutely don't want it to be the case that we're trying to squelch a program because it potentially costs a little more per student. So I thought I'd put that out there, because I know it's been talked about, that that's a theory.
When I know Jonathan shared with us at the committee, Laurel, I think that the Delta figure is combined the high school and the middle school costs, because it was really difficult for the finance department to even pool those costs. And the three vary only by a couple $1,000s, and largely that's driven often by how many senior teachers they have. So just for the public, like we have seen, more senior teachers that have taught for 15 or more years have a much higher salary, oftentimes, than lower salaried teachers. So depending on the balance, if we've had several retirements at one building and have a lot of somewhat younger, newer teachers, then the cost per building is kind of going to go down a little bit, because that's the biggest part of our costs. Whereas in a building where you have a lot of senior staff, their salaries are going to be, substantially higher. And so that, the variation there was pretty minimal. I don't know, statistically speaking, I'll defer to the mathematician, but.
Okay.
I'm just going to defer to Deb if she has a question.
I'm going to go to Stephen next because I want to make sure we get him in.
So just to come at this from a student perspective, I saw this on the agenda and have been asking people at Delta. I have a sibling at Delta. I attended Delta for a year, and I've just found some quick points that seem to be like key in the Delta students' thinking. So part of Delta's identity is that it's different from the other schools is a big thing I've noticed. And so calling it a school would make it seem more similar to Park Forest and Mount Ninny and State High. And I feel like that's something that was unpopularly voiced by many of the Delta students I talked to. If it becomes a school, it becomes an inherently democratic type, or less democratic type of thing, because schools have a more rigid power structure. And I've heard very, very positive things and experienced very positive things about the way that the democracy at Delta functions, and they feel like calling it a school will lessen that ability and lessen students' ability to participate and explore their own feelings on democracy in a school-wide protected settings. And then Delta students also worried about what actually is going to be changed. Most are very happy with Delta as it stands and see the change as something that they didn't ask for but being pushed on them, rather than something that was agreed upon by both parties or something that would serve to benefit them because they don't see any potential upside for themselves. And I just sort of summarized all the things I've heard as, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, as the main message from what Delta students want from this whole thing. They're very different perspectives from what I've heard in the presentation and what I've heard from Delta students, and so there's definitely a divide that I think could be tried to be mended that would serve to better communications and better understanding of what's happening. But so far I've seen that it hasn't been the most popular at Delta with the students at least. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Dr. Duffy?
If I can, we are to stick, I'm asking for more time, I guess, from the chair, so to speak.
You can have a minute, yeah.
I want to acknowledge, given some of the ideas that are floating around, particularly in relation to the school board acting or independently, or at least in a way that would somehow undo the place of Delta within the school district. One important piece of information that is important to share, and this is a matter of public knowledge, or certainly was shared at public meetings, when we conducted interviews with stakeholders in the community when we were considering the employment of our current superintendent. The one message that we got from the community, almost more than any other, was that the community really values Delta, and they would like the other schools to emulate Delta rather than the other way around. We heard that a dozen or more times. Of course, I didn't sit in all the meetings. We heard this a lot. So I think we'd be foolish to set aside or somehow significantly change a program that is so well respected.
Ms. Idney, did you have another thought? I'm so sorry. I thought you had one more thing to say.
I hadn't, but what I will add to his thing is that it works both ways. It also helps the high school and middle schools when students who prefer a Delta education have something like Delta to go to. So it's not just the Delta students directly that benefit, it's everybody.
I do have, I really appreciate this conversation, and, before I came on the school board, I never heard anything other than positive things about Delta. And to be fair, I was talking mostly to parents in the community, but they all just said how great it was. And so the idea of wanting to change it, the first time I heard that, I was like, well, why would we even do that? In terms of the data, Justin, what I heard you say is that it would be very difficult to replicate the data that comes back from the state because we don't even know exactly how the data is crunched by the state, nor do they publish a manual of how they crunch it.
That's correct. They don't give us access directly to all of the equations or formulas that they use for all of the measures or indicators. The other problem point is there's nothing for us to validate against, like we have with other, like the high school, Park Forest Middle. We could validate the data points that we're getting to make sure that we're doing that accurately. With Delta, we would be making a lot of assumptions, and I would hate to see us making incorrect ones.
Right. So if we did suppose hire someone to help us tease out and crunch the Delta numbers, there's no guarantee they'd be apples to apples comparison to what the state is providing for our high school MNMS and PFMS.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The other question I just had is, are there any ramifications or penalties for schools who write a testing plan and then still have less than 95% participation the next year?
Not that I'm aware of. We tried to look into that, and I think the only thing we could come up with is if we write a plan and we don't attempt to follow that. I think that would be the concern if we said we're going to do X, Y, Z, but we don't do X, Y, Z. I think that would be where the state problematic.
The state would consider that problematic, but if we say we do X, Y, Z, we follow through on X, Y, Z.
And if it's not productive or see positive results, I don't think there's a ramification that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Any last thoughts? Dr. Anderson.
Thanks. Just to follow up on what Jackie just asked, what I heard your question was there ramifications of, say, the participation rate of PSSAs if that remains low, right? Even despite having a plan, if you still have a high percentage of people, I think I heard John say 20% or something opted out last year. So say Delta were to become a school and you have a 20% opt-out rate, we make a plan, we follow the plan, still a 20% opt-out rate. There's no ramifications of that. But every student who doesn't participate in the PSSA beyond the sort of 5% grace, right, counts as a non-proficient, which means the numbers aren't going to look good. I mean, that's just factual, right? When you look at proficient versus non-proficient, you're going to have, if say it's a 20% opt-out rate, 15% of your students are going to look like they're not proficient, but we actually don't know because they didn't take the test. So are there ramifications for having low proficiency rates, right, from the state? I guess that's one question. And then more importantly, like if we feel like the PSSAs are telling us something about how our students are learning, and if we have a high percentage of students who aren't taking the test, do we feel we have the information we need to know whether those students are being successful, right? We have other measures that we can look at. What we care about is student learning. PSSAs are one measure. If some large percentage of students aren't taking that test, we have to assess whether they're learning in a different way. Do we have that information? I mean, we're not talking about a huge population of middle school students, 135 or so, right? Like, we should be able to tease that out, but I guess that's sort of what I'm asking. Are there ramifications from the state, not just, you know, if there's a low participation rate, but if you look like you have kind of low proficiency rates, is that a problem? And then do we as educators have other means of assessing how our students are doing? Paul at least is shaking his head, so he knows what I'm talking about. Does that make sense as a question?
Thanks. Yeah, we tried to answer that in the one question as far as what would if the data came back that it was affecting teaching, and having that information would help us target, like in the Keystone or PSSAs we're really talking about. The areas that we need to focus more on. And John had talked about crosswalking the curriculum, like where are we missing gaps? Where do we have gaps that we're not hitting so that we can make sure that we're augmenting the curriculum to hit those areas. So that would try to answer your question with that piece. We do have MAP data, but that's not a summative assessment. That's a different type to see if kids are on target, and maps to help the teachers inform how they change or adjust the teaching as they progress through the year, and what they need to focus on to help the students. As I think we three times we give the map assessment.
And I think what we've heard from the teachers is generally speaking for student learning, the map is more helpful. I mean, the PSSA, you take it and you don't get the data until so far later anyway, that it's really hard to respond to that data. So the map is, I think, more helpful on a day-to-day basis, right? That's what I think we've heard.
And so one of the things that would really be a shining star for Delta, in my opinion, would be the climate survey that all of our schools recently did anonymously. And I think that data would show how the great things that are happening in Delta. Unfortunately, the way that things are structured, back to the school conversation, when students at Delta Middle took the climate survey, they had to pick Park Forest or Mount Nittany. When the State High students at Delta, they had to pick State High. Because it's an anonymous survey, we're not going to be able to disaggregate data to say, here's our climate survey beyond, student as how well do they know their operations of math. So that's a frustrating point that I think Delta could really show how well they're doing with students in a different approach to student growth.
Thanks.
You want to shut that off? Yeah, I guess one of my concerns about the PSSA data impacting us is then if that data is relayed to these niche.com sites, is it accurate reflecting what we offer at our school? And so if we're trying to inform the public that are moving to the area, are we actually misinforming them because the data is not representative due to the way it's set up? So that's a concern that was brought up at a committee meeting. Because I'm not sure that niche.com takes in culture and climate data into their formulas.
Actually, I think they do, because I did research them, and the link that you had put us to with that other school, that school had like a C+ rating. So that was also my concern. But when you look into how they do all of their scoring, they do go into a lot of details, a lot of information, and I believe climate study is one of them.
All right, are there any other questions from the board? Okay. In that case, as noted earlier in the meeting, we are going to provide an additional opportunity for public comment on the Delta Program Committee update. Each individual who speaks will be allotted up to 3 minutes, and if you would please state your name and where you reside in the district for the record when you speak, we'd really appreciate it. So we'll start with in person. Is there anyone here in person who'd like, yes, please come on up. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Paul McCormick. I live in the Highlands, and I'm a teacher at Delta. I guess I would just make 3 points in 3 minutes. One is you've already heard, there's significant work to do yet with helping parents and teachers understand the rationale behind this decision. We did a poll, or the parents did a poll, which was displayed at our November 16th meeting. And one of the questions asked of the parents was, do you want to become a school? 60% of the parents said, no, thank you. But 35% of the parents said, help me understand what I don't understand here. I need more information. I need to understand this conversation that's going on here. And I would say that that reflects probably the opinion of the 18 or 20 teachers at Delta at the middle and high school level. 60% are probably like, why change something, kind of to echo Stephen's comments. And then some of the teachers are like, well, I'm not against this, but I just don't understand the driving force, where this is coming from. So there would be that point. As a teacher, individually speaking for myself, it would be regrettable for there to be a programmatic change to Delta simply because there's logistical problems with PowerSchool and PIMS not talking. That would be regrettable given what Dan has already said, that the community has spoken loudly when you were searching for a superintendent that this was sometimes people sitting next to me who I had no idea who they were, talking about Delta being a positive force in the community. And then just to kind of piggyback on what Peter and Gretchen were talking about, in the event that we were to move to becoming a school, I do think it would be a wise decision for the board to, at the 50-year mark, ironically, 1974 to 2024, make an affirmative statement about what is unique about Delta, what the board wants to preserve with Delta, and have that maybe stand for another 50 years and revisit it after we're all long gone. So those are my 3 points. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Would you like to come and give comment? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Crisfield, and I do want to run my kid home, so I thank you for letting me go next. I emailed you recently about the lack of transparent process to identify the problem, the objectives, the solutions, and the ways of comparing the problems, or the solutions. So if data tracking is the problem, it seems to me that there would be more than one way to solve the problem, but we've only been presented with one solution, which is to change from a program to a school. Furthermore, I can't imagine how a change in status would make Delta better. I can't really think of any way to make this school better. For my kid, it is as good as, I can't think of a way to make it better. So since change means change, I can only think of possibly worse outcomes and not better because I can't think of a way to make it better. And I challenge you to think back to when you were in middle school and how did that go for you? Like, what was your middle school experience like? Think about your personal middle school experience. And then think about it from my perspective when every single day I pick him up. How was your day? It was awesome. Always loves to go to school. Like, did any of you have that middle school experience? 'Cause I definitely didn't have that middle school experience. When I ask what he learned about physics, math, accounting, law, so many other topics, he always has concrete facts, insights to discuss with me, and he's super happy with his friends. Like, I can't give you a stronger testimonial. So in order to earn my support, I want more than a promise that there won't be impacts. I would like to know how you will secure Delta's independence and reward this amazing program for its public school innovation. I agree, in its 50th year, it's the time to say, we're SCADSD, we have a Delta program. Wouldn't you like to know more about how we do it? This is a point of pride for our district. So I'm kind of glad that this came up because it's a chance for us all to raise the profile of Delta for you, to take ownership of it. But I still feel like, as many of you have said, we do need to know what was the problem we're trying to solve with this solution. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Is there anyone? Yeah, please come on up to the podium. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this discussion and all the work that people have done on the committee to have all those answers. My name's Danielle Crow. I live in Ferguson Township. I also teach at State High, and I have for 23 years. And in every one of those 23 years, I've had at least a handful of Delta students take my class or just offer something they don't have room for at Delta. And it's a privilege. I've gotten to know so many kids over those 23 years. Missed Peter, I guess, somehow. But, and I've recognized the Delta magic. It took me some time to figure out what it was, but I think I have, and I am worried that that magic is potentially threatened by going from a school to a program. I should say now that I am also a Delta parent, probably not a shock that when they opened a middle school and my approaching middle schooler had the option, I told her all about it, and that is what she chose. But she chose that program, and everyone who's at Delta chose that program. And I've taught a lot of kids in school that didn't necessarily choose their school, and it's different. The energy is different with the compulsory attendance of school and the privilege of being enrolled in a program. And I recognize that investment in students in the Delta community, that they were invested in their program and that they were excited about it. I mean, not every kid, and these are not like all easy kids, right? They're kids that didn't necessarily want to go to school and then turned into people who loved going to school. My kid did love going to school, but hit a snag in middle school with a health condition that turned out to be a long-term health condition that we can't fix with a Tylenol. We're working on it. It's a long road. And there was a moment where, a lot of moments where she wasn't really going to school much anymore and not participating in the Delta community the way she would have liked to, and that Delta students are obligated to. It's their covenant that you show up and you be kind. It's pretty simple. But when she wasn't showing up, this health condition was not going to disappear and she'd feel better and get back into it. She was going to have to learn how to fight through it, which is tough because middle school's tough enough when you are in perfect health. And I think sitting down with John and, all of, even the nurse at the Delta community, everybody was on board with kind of reminding her that it was her choice to be in this program. And if she couldn't show up, then, she couldn't really be in this program. And there was no threat, there was no harshness, there was just a reminder that it was her choice. And it was the closest we've had to a health miracle. It was all she needed to push through. And she continues to push through every day that she can to get to and through school because she loves the privilege of being at Delta. And it's a choice program. That doesn't exist in a school. And that's my 3 minutes. But thank you for listening to my perspective and experience.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else? Please, if you'd come to the we'll get to everyone, so if you'd come to the podium, please. You're good.
Hi, as I already said, I'm Jen Norris. I have non-identical twins in 6th grade. We moved here from San Francisco Unified School District. The girls started school here in kindergarten. I knew about Delta from San Francisco. There isn't a program. There are 110 kindergartens in San Francisco, and to choose from, everything from public Montessori to Korean immersion to everything you could imagine, and Delta's better. And I am standing here before you, imploring you to push pause on a decision. I have worked a long career in huge data sets, and if the driving force behind this is about data, there has to be a way to look at the data somehow behind the scenes accurately with reporting teams, the appropriate SQL queries, with creative ways of trying to look at the data. It hasn't passed the litmus test for me yet that the data that is wanted by the administration cannot be pulled out. I don't know what data is wanted. Delta is operating, in my opinion, from a defensive posture. This report that the committee has put forth that we reviewed tonight, I heard Jonathan presented a few nights ago at the Delta PTSO meeting. And basically my understanding is that Delta was told that for equity, for a whole host of reasons, data reasons, we need to try to figure out what's going on at Delta. And Delta has been put in a position where they threw out as many questions as they could to try to say, what would this change? Would that change? And now that we have this report, what I want is not, would it change yes or no, but under what code is Delta currently functioning? And under what code would Delta function if it became a school? Under state code, under SCASD policy code? Like, how would these things really change? And 20% of Delta middle school students do not take tests. That's my understanding. The PSSAs, they opt out. And I do not believe that year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 down the road, opting out of testing isn't going to change if Delta's a school, state mandated programming to change outcomes isn't going to impact the culture. The culture is really, really special.
That's your 3 minutes. Thanks for your comment, Ms. Norris. Would you like to come up? Yeah, come ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight. My name is Laura Fowler. I live in the State College Area School District. I have 2 kids, one in high school and one at Delta. And what I have to say, in talking with my daughter who's now in 8th grade about 8th grade, and I echo some of the comments already relayed, I asked her how she felt about going back to school this year, and she said, "Mom, it feels like a warm hug." And I thought, wow, that is extraordinarily different from my middle school experience and really everybody else I know. We used to do math problems with her when she was little. She suffered a huge loss in confidence in the traditional school system, and then came to Delta and has relearned her love of math, right? I find that the teachers meet the students where they are. That was true actually with us as we were in Sweden 2019 to 2020. COVID hit and needing to figure out how to actually regain our footing back in the school district. And Delta was like, yeah, go ahead. We will teach your kids from Sweden. While they're in Sweden, we'll bring them back into the school district. And so we've found actually the approachability of the students themselves, the teachers, right? The intrinsic things that make the culture of the school be so incredibly important. My daughter is currently working with a whole group of students to figure out what rock band songs to play. Not captured in the data is the amount of negotiation they're spending on a Saturday evening going well beyond what's taught in class. And my worry is that the data is the tail wagging the dog on a program that's incredibly successful. I work at Penn State. I'm Penn State's Chief Sustainability Officer, and I'm charged with creating a new school of sustainability. Delta is in fact my model for the intrinsic things that go into how do we create successful education programs. So I asked you to think very carefully about that warm hug, which is Delta, hard to measure in the data, but perhaps in thinking about the culture survey, is there a separate culture survey that gets at the same information that you're not collecting otherwise? So really encourage you to think creatively about this and hard about what you're what you're asking the school district to do in thinking about this program. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else here in the room who would like to make a public comment this evening? Is there anyone attending virtually who would like to make a public comment? You can raise your hand to let me know you're interested. Oh, I do see one hand, but just for your reference, the raised hand button is in the bottom of your Zoom window. So Scott Woods, I'm going to acknowledge you to make a comment.
Thank you very much. So I'm the parent of a Delta middle school student. I also happen to be the owner of a software company that specializes in building special student information systems. So just purely on a volunteer basis, if there's anything that I can do to help in terms of expertise in that area, that's on offer, just to kind of add to the pool of experienced voices in the room who are offering help and expertise, if that can help make the administration's life easier. 2 concerns I wanted to voice. I went and grabbed, because of talking about the impact on opt-out and what that might do, I went and got the PSSA district level data to see what that looks like so far. And if the data, if it looks like that, how do I say this? If every student past 5% also counts as being non-proficient, let's say that Delta had, when I went and crunched the numbers, the effect of a 20% not opt-out rate in Delta would have a really dramatic effect on the Delta schools standing compared to a lot of the other schools in the district. So for example, like as I'm looking at these, it looks like in English proficiency, it would be close to the bottom, like the bottom 2%. And in math proficiency, even if every student was completely proficient, it would knock a really big percentage off of that. So I think one of the concerns is like, if we dovetail like wanting the school to be more visible on niche, or these other public platforms, does it reflect poorly on the school if we take a massive whack out of what its results look like by taking 15% of the students and making them non-proficient? That's a really big number. Most of the schools, there's many schools that have 0% non-proficient, and we'll have 15. So it may be disastrous in terms of what the school's image looks like publicly by trying to shoot for it. We should make sure that we're going to get good numbers. And that goes beyond the idea of the performance improvement plan not being enforced now, but if we continually don't adhere to it, what will future legislations rule in terms of the need for the school to begin to make improvements as opposed to just it being okay to continually fail with the performance improvement plan? So those are my comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Woods. Is there anyone else attending virtually who would like to make a public comment or in the room? All right, I want to thank you all for your patience. With seeing no other public comment, I think we'll take a 5-minute recess. All right, welcome back to the November 20th, 2023 SCASD School Board meeting. We will pick up where we left off, which is with information report C. Mr. Brown and Mr. Fisher will provide an overview of the 2024-25 proposed deferred maintenance and capital projects. Welcome, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. So what we've provided here is kind of a list of our anticipated projects for next year that we will ask permission to bid on at our next board meeting. We want to kind of get them out in front of everybody so that you have some time to digest and get any questions answered that you may have. Go down through these at a pretty high level, try to keep it brief, and then any questions kind of at the end, feel free to shoot away. First one's at Ferguson Township. So we put a stormwater basin in last year, I guess this year. And in doing so, the township alerted us that we kind of have to do some more work with our stormwater swales and topography out there at the school. So we're working with them to achieve that, as well as we hope to just seal the parking lot for longevity. Park Forest Elementary, just two domestic hot water boilers. They've reached the age of their useful life. One thing to note on this one really is that currently the system is set up so that one boiler does the kitchen, one boiler does the rest of the school, so we have no redundancy whatsoever if one goes down. So we will arrange them in a way that will have total redundancy throughout the school for either the kitchen or any restrooms. Mountain Indian Middle cafeteria kind of kitchen renovation. This really stems from the end of the useful life for the kitchen equipment itself, kind of the serving line, as well as the makeup air and hood unit, over the hot cooking area. So we're still developing kind of the scope of what we want to do. The cafeteria itself could use a refresh, flooring paint, some sound abatement, that kind of thing, or attenuation. Ferguson Township, pretty straightforward. We have a roof that's out of warranty, part of the school, so we're looking at replacing that, support one of the flat roofs. Mountain Indian Middle, air handling units. So this is the 2 units that feed the gym and the unit that feeds the cafeteria. They're all 3 units are original to the building, due for replacement. We've had some issues with the 2 that feed the gym on a consistent basis. As well as the main hot water lines that run through the school, kind of above the drop ceiling. A lot of the unions in that piping we've had issues with, so we're looking to kind of make those repairs as well as part of a capital project.
Mike, so were these, when we did the big HVAC work, so these are all separate things, like when we
Correct,
changed everything?
correct.
Okay.
These are
'Cause
not
that's why
the
I was-
same air handlers. Correct.
Gotcha.
Yep. Grays Woods, it's the last school that we don't have an emergency generator in. Easterly Parkway, we bid last year. It's getting in before July 1 of 2024. It's a long lead time item, generators, so we're trying to get a jump on this one. And that way all schools will at least have some emergency backup. One thing to note on this one, and at Easterly, we have developed a plan to not only just put a generator in for our emergency loads, emergency lighting, to get people out of the building. We are sizing these that we can keep kids in school. We won't have air conditioning throughout the whole school, but we will have heat, and we do have ways that we can manually transfer loads to provide some cooling potentially. It depends on the school and how the systems are set up. But our goal really is, if we have a long power outage, all day long, that the kids can stay in school and keep learning. Grays Woods parking lot's in pretty rough shape. A lot of cracks and settling throughout, and then we also have some concrete, some trip hazards on the sidewalk as well. So we're going to address that. Roof upgrades at the north building. So we have a couple small pieces of roof kind of interior to the building that you can't really see from the outside that hold water, more water than we'd like them to hold before they actually drain. So we're trying to remedy that situation. We do have 2 lighting upgrades on this, kind of the same as we did at Easterly Parkway, Park Forest Elementary and Grays Woods. They're all still kind of a lot of old T8s. I think there's even some T12s intermixed in there, so we can see some good energy savings with those projects. As well, we have there's a big advantage with reduced maintenance costs as well, because we're no longer any ballasts that we would have to replace. Backing up one to 2411, this is kind of along the same lines as the work we did at Mount Nittany Middle School as far as the envelope remediation. So right now we've surveyed the entire district, this building, along with the north building, are kind of our next in line. Neither one are near as bad as Mount Nittany Middle, so the scope will be greatly reduced. But we're just trying to keep, the exterior of our buildings well maintained so that, we don't have the moisture intrusion that we saw at Mount Nittany Middle. Easterly Parkway, so our hot water and chilled water pumps, they're at the useful life, and what we're doing as we're replacing these on these types of systems is that we're putting variable frequency drives on, changing some valves out from 3 ways to 2 ways, so we can actually get some turn down or reduce speed on our pumps when we don't need as much cooling or heating capacity, and there's quite a bit of energy savings with that as well. Coral Street, so this one, I expect some questions on. So this generator is obviously not very old. The school's not very old. And this kind of comes from, when we lost power at Coral Street, I think 2 years ago or so now. We went out checking the generator, could see that it was running at about 4% capacity, right? So we have all this capacity sitting there. Now it does require a different transfer switch from emergency loads, but so kind of the same line of thinking as we're looking at Grace Woods and Easterly, that we can get our heating system and potentially even some cooling onto this generator. So once again, we can just keep kids, if it's 20 degrees out, kids can stay in school. Panorama here, some traffic easing. So we did put a speed bump in a year and a half ago at the stop sign out here. I'm sure everybody's gone over it several times. You can blame me. And so we still have people kind of, once they hit that, then they step on the gas and are then flying through the lots and then out through. And biggest concern really is in the summertime when we have kids everywhere using the baseball field there, and they're crossing the road, and they're so what we're kind of looking at is a raised sidewalk, so it would serve two purposes. One, kind of to give that visibility of pedestrians going back and forth, and then two, it would force cars to slow down.
I'm going to thank you for that speed bump, not blame you for it.
Okay. Renovation here at PV. So, as we kind of know, we're doing the renovations at the north building, at the former CTC shops, and IT will be relocating over to that space. So we're looking to add space in where IT suite is and get that space renovated. There will be some abatement. We still have some asbestos in this building, so we want to just go ahead and take care of that and remove it during part of this project, as well as some of the HVAC issues we've experienced. Some of the equipment in this building has reached its useful life as well. So we're going to look at some replacement there. And then lastly, an access ramp at the south building. So out kind of near the, I guess, the kitchen dock area, that little side loop is a kind of a homemade ramp that our staff uses to get garbage out of the kitchen. If they don't use those doors, it has to go clear around the school, and nobody has time to do that during the lunch rush, right? So we want to get them a much safer walkway to be able to get the trash out. So, questions on any of that? It was pretty quick. Yeah.
I would like to say thank you for, on the last item here, it says that the physical plant is working with CTC classes on design to give students real world experience. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you for where it was appropriate, kind of like drawing the students into the design work of what's going on.
We do. We work closely with the CTC to try to identify at least one project every year, so that to try to get them out, and we meet with the class and kind of get them thinking about it, and actually get them working on it as well. And then our engineering team is super helpful, and to help out with that as well.
Is there any other info or discussion on this? Dr. Buck?
Yeah, thank you very much. I always really appreciate the levels of detail that you provide. So you brought up energy savings, and when we were doing the power purchase agreement discussion, we talked about, you had brought up like the energy savings and commissioning plan that you were going on. So is this part of that plan?
It is. I mean, we know, going forward, we know that we have, so for example, lighting upgrades, it's low-hanging fruit for energy efficiency, right? And we know we have T12s, we know we have T8s, we know the payback on that is somewhere around 10 to 12 years. Factoring in maintenance costs, that's always a little bit of a tricky number. But yes, so the short answer is yes.
Okay, are you able to, and you don't have to do it now if you can, great, but are you able to quantify what those savings will be?
We will, yes.
Okay.
When we go for, we'll have those numbers. Once we get permission to bid, then we will start engineering, and we'll have those numbers, an estimate, just the same as we did for Easterly Parkway. I can get you Easterly Parkways pretty quickly if you'd like it in the next day or so. But
Sure, yeah, and so when you bring the final item before the board, will you bring those numbers with you?
We'll have them, yes.
Awesome, thanks.
Ms. Idney?
Which was why Panorama was so expensive when you mentioned the abatement and so I guess that wasn't done even though we moved into this part of the building.
Correct.
A couple of years ago, we had some real concerns about handicap access and curb cuts and things like that, some other things, and there was a sort of list at the high school. Have those been all accomplished, or are they still on anyone's radar, do you know?
We did a project almost 2.5 years ago when I first came on and performed all of those curb cuts at the high school.
Okay. I know there had been some other things as well. We prioritized those at the time, but it may be worth, if you haven't, refinding that list.
Yes, I think, I'm looking over here, I think there was a list, but I thought we had addressed.
That'd be great.
could,
That would be great. I just didn't want to, that's all I was checking on. And
Sure.
good to hear the curb cuts were made. Thanks.
Mr. Lewis?
What's the fuel for the generators?
Natural gas.
Okay.
All right, if there's no other questions or discussion, then we'll let Mr. Fisher step back. Oh, Mr. Buck.
Yeah, this is a
Dr.
really
Buck,
quick comment. So, Ms. Brand and I went to a conference in March, right? Where we got to see pretty significant battery units at schools, and it would be great. I mean, we have these things in front of us and engineering whole new systems. Like, I want to be practical here, but the same way that we've moved that electric bus, right, and solar investment down the field, I would love to see how we're going to start attending to batteries. And I mean, district-wide facility master plan, I guess, is the place to do it. But I just want to make a note while this stuff is on the agenda, because there are alternatives that already exist, and we saw case studies on those schools. That's all.
That's why I asked my question.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah, great.
Sure, and I would fully expect, we have, for example, the generator at Mount Nittany Middle is getting near its useful life. So, I would fully expect, kind of as we start looking at replacement, that we can start looking into some of that technology.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fisher. All right, next up, Mr. Brown and Mr. Vigilone are with us to review the 2024-2025 budget development opt-out process. Opt-out resolution process, apologies.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and get started here. Just wanted to reiterate something that was mentioned earlier this evening, and that was that next Wednesday, the 29th, we will have a Finance Committee meeting. We'll be talking about the financial statements. The auditors will be present at that meeting, as well as there'll be additional information about the budget. And then on December 4th, kind of starting with the end of the conversation, but allowing Mr. Vigileone to get caught up here. And you're much speedier than I, so very good. You're now the AV person from now on. But then December 4th, we'll have a much further detailed information about our budget development and the proposed budget as we get prepared for this budget cycle. But tonight, just want to provide a brief overview of the information that's been provided to you. Our budget development process did begin on November 6th. December 18th is an important date because that is the last board meeting prior to the deadline to pass an opt-out resolution, which is in early January. It's 120 days prior to the election, which this year, because it's presidential year, is in April. January 24th would be the deadline to adopt a preliminary budget unless the resolution is adopted. April 15th, we expect to present the 24-25 proposed final budget. May 20th would be a public hearing for the district 24-25 final budget. June 3rd is when we project to have an adoption of the final budget and associated resolutions, which would also include the tax rate. There is a ever-developing website for our budget development process that can be found using that link. And so to summarize again, the actions that the board can take, you would need to take one of these two future action items, and one would be to adopt an opt-out resolution, the other would be to approve a preliminary budget. One of the items that we have been talking about is, and we will talk very heavily about over the next several months, is what is the appropriate tax increase, if any, to fund the district's budget. And so we wanted to put together a summary for you. We're using obviously no tax increase, so it'd be 0% change, a 2% change, and a 5.3% change. So 5.3 is, say it with me, the Act 1 index. There you go. Very good. Hey, when it approaches 10 o'clock, we need to add a little bit of humor to make the night go by, all right? Because we are pushing for an 11 o'clock finish, right, Mrs. Yoder? Okay. That was my estimate, not hers. But no, but we are closer to my estimate than Mrs. Yoder's. So then to show you what the impact of those three tax rates has on our budget, we have the total revenue and the total projected real estate tax revenue from those three tax rates. The 2% tax rate I did not mention. That is basically our historical average for the last 5 years. It technically is 1.9%, I believe, but we generally use 2%, and it's pretty close there. So those are your three parameters that we've presented to you tonight. We're absolutely, that decision is yours in June. Obviously, the administration will make a recommendation unless you give other direction. So we would prefer to not use too many different variables as we go through the budget process. But at this point, we'll continue to plan on these three variables unless we receive direction from you otherwise as we move forward. Does that make sense?
Randy, so typically sometimes you give us like a cumulative impact of those changes over time. Is that something we'll discuss at the?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to do the timing. Great.
Yep, no problem. And so again, looking at our budget cycle, our budget schedule, some additional steps that we take internally. We verify all of our positions with all of our different departments and buildings. That's scheduled to happen later in November. We'll be looking at a possible 23-24 budget revision based upon October enrollment on December 4th. That's internally for our different buildings. If the projected enrollment for October 1 was very different than what it actually was, then there will be a budget adjustment for the buildings. We will communicate our personnel and non-personnel requests to the appropriate assistant superintendent on December 4th. That's what our budget heads are to be working with their assistant superintendents on over the month of November. Budget spreadsheets will be distributed to the departments by December 18th, and then they're due back to accounting by January 12th. And then we have various budget presentations January to April. And I'm going to steal the thunder of Ms. Zidney on her very last night as a member of the board. No, we do not have a schedule of those presentations just yet. I apologize. There you go. There you go. We do not.
Not even for last year.
So I answered it before you asked tonight. Any other questions for this evening? And I hope, just to state, for those who may not know me very well, I take this job very seriously. It is just that these are very routine discussions that we are having preliminarily, but the state budget the district budget is no joking matter, and we take it very seriously as we go through the process. And since we are so early, we can add a little humor at this time. Anybody have any other questions? Thank you.
Dr. Buck has
So
a
does that
question.
mean that later in this, you're going to subtract humor?
No.
From the
I just won't add
He's
it.
going to revert
Okay,
to his
all right,
normal.
okay. Thing. I mean, that's like
There you go. All right, thank you very much.
Without a lot of parameters, how else would we welcome Joe to the district if we don't have a lot of parameters around the budget?
This is true.
Wow.
He'll get it done. All right.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Randy and Joe. All right, next up we have policies. So Ms. Pierce will come back to the table to join us to review several new and revised policies. Oh, all right.
Yes, that's right.
Because there's a lot of financial policies on the docket or on the agenda, I should say.
So for information and discussion tonight, we have the first policy we're going to talk about is not financial, but the remaining policies are, which is why you're here. We talked about policy 239 in October, and you all made a suggestion about the wording about 5 foreign exchange students, so we took your suggestion and we used the phrase up to a full-time equivalent of 5 foreign exchange students. So that's in the authority section twice, actually. The rest of the policy we did not make a change to, so we're bringing it back to you to see if this works.
Linda, am I remembering, I can't remember if we just said, like any policy, there's always, the board can always supersede the policy, or maybe it was
Yes.
mentioned in the notes there
Yes.
might be was it in regulations? I
What's
can't
that?
remember. Yeah, that's all. I wasn't sure if we talked about that there would be regulations with it that mentioned that, but I think that was something else, so never mind, sorry.
Are there any questions on policy 239 or comments? Are we happy with the edits so we can move it forward for action? All right, let's do so.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Then on to the financial policies. We have policy 601.
So this is, what was the title of this one?
Fiscal objectives.
Fiscal objectives. This has not been, none of these have really been updated in any
A really, really long time.
any
Yeah.
recent times. Thank you. And we just wanted to, there were a couple that we needed to get updated, and so the HR staff, in working through these, just pulled out several that we felt were able to be completed timely and effectively. So we open to any questions here. Just updating some language, but not really any meaning.
Are there any questions on 601, whose list of legal references is longer than the actual policy itself? I'll point out.
Bingo.
It is.
All right, so we're good to move that one on to action.
Okay. Our next one is 605. Basically,
yeah.
the same thing that you said. It's
Correct.
And the same thing Jackie said, the legal references are longer than the policy.
This acknowledges your ability to assess taxes, levy taxes.
Are we okay moving this one forward for action? All right.
Right.
When do we talk about the policy retirement? Do we mention that one now? 6051.
Oh, that's what I was just going to say.
I'm sorry, okay.
6051. Yes, that is one that we are recommending to retire.
And I think the reason there is that the changes in 605 allow for incorporate that policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Everyone
up.
okay retiring 605.1? Okay.
All right.
607 tuition income.
So this just allows for the ability to assess tuition for non-resident students.
Any questions? No? So we can move on to action.
Yeah, we can move this one on to action.
608 bank accounts.
So if you don't remember, generally in May or June of each year, or when we want to add a financial institution or depository, you actually approve those, and that's because it's a requirement of your policy. So this just has some small language updates from the previous version.
Any questions on 608?
Just a reminder for the public who might actually still be watching that we've discussed these at a policy meeting as well. So it's not like we haven't talked about them before. We've talked about them in a committee meeting, and now it's to the board for information and discussion.
Correct.
And then it'll come back to the board one more time for voting. So it looks like we're just
Passing
waving
it
our
through.
hand and passing it along, but we've actually talked about it in committee before.
And to that point, these are also very boilerplate financial policies at this point too that have very little editing to do. So
Until 609.
All
Until we
right,
get to this one.
609, investment of district funds.
So
Might be a little bit to talk about there.
So this is the one that we really wanted to be brought forward. There have been a lot of changes in investment legislation and restrictions, and as well as those vehicles that are allowed by the school district. And so we wanted to update that, felt that it was appropriate, but keeping in mind that we also want a lot of restriction because we respect the taxpayer dollars, whether it's local, state, or federal, and we want those monies to be invested safely, but also to be invested with a ample rate of return to benefit the school district residents as well. There are some new types of investments that are now permissible, and we are wanted to be able to take advantage of those. Those are under Act 10. and that can be found on page 6. But what Mr. Vigileone and I recommend is restricting the amount of those Act 10 investments by a percentage of our available funds, so that we are, again, they are safe and protected investments as well, but because they are different than the traditional investments, we're still putting that cap on there for and that way you have given us some guidelines, and we'll follow those guidelines.
So could you say which percent of which funds?
I knew you were going to ask that, Jim.
Okay.
Yeah, you can come over, Joe.
Joe's coming to the rescue.
Joe's coming to the rescue. I was trying to look nonchalantly in
On
the
page
policy.
9, it says no more than 12% of district funds available for investment in Act 10.
Correct. Yep.
Yep.
That's,
And it's the funds in only Fund 10, the general fund, and Fund 22, the capital reserve fund.
Okay.
but Act 10 investments would only be used for capital funds.
Right, okay,
But the cap is of the total.
okay, gotcha.
For some of these investments, do we ever get like financial planners advice or anything like that, secondary? Before?
We do not. These are not very complex investments in terms of bonds and those types of things. This is something that I come with a good bit of experience in as well, but you're mainly investing in CDs and money market accounts or savings accounts. So it's really an apples to apples comparison, and it really boils down to the rate and how long you want to lock the money up into fixed term investments to make sure that you have adequate cash flow. And so you do cash forecasting, and you do comparisons of rates, and you try to get the best of both worlds.
Okay.
Mr. Elias.
You know, you had a question, and this would be on page 2 under bankers' acceptances. We're talking about foreign trade transaction. Is that like an international fund? Is that what, or is it, or does foreign have a different meaning there?
I'm looking for.
So under bankers' acceptances,
This is terminology that came straight out of PSBA, so
Okay.
I did not have any adjustments to that notifying the policy. This policy, with the exception of the calculation of Act 10, of how we calculated what funds could be used and restrictions placed on that, as well as the section which relates to interest rate swaps. Other than that, it pretty well follows a PSBA policy.
And if you look at page 3, foreign currency risk.
yeah, I saw that. I was, so that's what it's related to?
I think that they are both.
Okay,
related, yes.
okay.
That's what I would assume.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was the same foreign, yeah.
Are there any other questions on this policy 609? Go ahead.
That I was particularly pleased to see the added language in the middle of page 7 on interest rate swaps.
Randy's favorite word.
I think that's a good addition.
It has 4 letters.
It has.
Yeah.
And I've said that before, haven't I?
Any other questions on 609 or comments? All right, we're okay to move this forward to action then. All right.
All right, we move on to 611, purchases budgeted.
And again, we're just updating with some more consistent language to what we're used to in our operations today.
Mm-hmm.
And because the state's bidding threshold does change periodically, sometimes on an annual basis, we just are using that language in this policy so that we don't have to go back and change it every time or remember to go back and change it every time those thresholds change.
Any questions on 611 or comments? All right, we'll move that forward to action.
Which brings us to 612, purchases not budgeted.
Okay. Similar explanation?
Other side of the coin.
Other side of the coin.
Right.
Or the T account.
Any questions or comments on 612 from the board? Or Stephen? You want to wade into financial policy? All right, we'll go ahead and move that forward for action as well.
And last but not least, 617, petty cash.
And I'll be honest, this one I almost actually asked to be retired because I truly don't like to have petty cash around, but there are times when it is necessary to have a supply of cash for different purposes. So we felt we reconciled that thought and asked to just update this and keep this in our policy supply holdings. Okay.
All right, any questions on 617? All right, that one's straightforward. We'll move that one along for action as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is an opportunity for board members to provide a brief update on their committee initiatives. I added the word brief to the script. Dan, would you like to give a CIU update?
I'd be happy to do that. I can report about the most recent IU board meeting, which was last week. A number of items within the agenda that are worth mentioning. One is some work that the IU's been doing in terms of their conducting surveys regarding the engagement of the intermediate unit with member districts and the effectiveness, efficacy of the role of personnel in the IU. They extended a contract with a group called School Perceptions to basically continue this process, and I think they're going to extend it to a broad group of external stakeholders in terms of the participation in the survey. I'm audible. Okay, sounds good. There's also some discussion about the parameters for telework. It's been a topic of discussion by the administration for the last year and a half, having to do with again the experience that people had working from home and how important that can be sometimes in terms of the employees' personal lives. They've been working on trying to establish some guidelines and parameters for the IU employees around that particular decision process. So they brought us up to date on that. There was an approval of actions to reply to in the fulfillment of district training requests. Member districts or various school districts within the IU sometimes ask for assistance in terms of technical training. And so there were requests by several districts for support that way. And then there were policies presented, just like we do here, for first and second reading. And those were essentially the main topics from the agenda last week.
I'd also just like to add that the CIU 10 board is having a big turnover after this election. So Dan will be leaving CIU 10 board, as well as 4 other very dependable and involved members. So we're really, new members have some big shoes to fill, but I'm sure we are up to it. So
absolutely. Just
wanted to mention that. All right, thank you so much, Dan. Amy, do you have anything to add about the SCASD Ed Foundation?
No. Went through the grants awards, so that all got wrapped up at that meeting. There was some further discussion about the Maroon and Gray Society and went through a number of the nominees for that and some discussions about that and the big event. And really, those were the 2 main items at the meeting.
Thank you. Carlene, is there anything on CTC Local Advisory Committee?
We had 2 meetings before this meeting, so I want to report on that briefly. The first meeting was on October 25. That was the LAC meeting. And basically, we went over a lot of the grants that were applied for, like the supplementary equipment grants. And last year, we had gotten 27, we had requested 27,000, but we got 34,000. So this year, we want 35,000. So hopefully, we'll get 40,000. So it was basically a lot of these grants, the agriculture and youth grant. And also, I wanted to mention about for the culinary dinners that's coming up, the Jamaican dinner, the Cuban dinner. And so there's a whole list of them. So I want people to know about that. We talked about the NOCTI pretest, and the kids took that, and 108 students out of 119 scored higher than the cutoff, which is a 92% pass rate. And so the post-test will be coming up in April 16th. And then we had the CLNA meeting just a few days ago that Jim and I attended. And there was basically, we have to do the CLNA meeting because that's part of the requirement for the Perkin grants. So that's a pretty long meeting that we had virtually. And so we talked about the non-traditional scores that we always get low on because of the fact that we want male students to take, different gender. So that's the only thing. Other than that, we had compliant on almost all of them. And there was one thing that I had mentioned to Jim about if he wanted to talk about it, was the technology requirement for the CTE and the new challenges with cybersecurity for the automotive. I don't know if you want to say something quickly about that,
just
because
briefly.
I thought that was interesting.
Briefly, no, so that was the comprehensive local needs assessment meeting, which we're required to have, and that's a county-wide meeting, so it also includes representatives from the CPI, the Central Pennsylvania Institute for Technology, and it's basically, like Carlene said, for the fulfillment of the needs grant. But one of the things that came up in our local meeting was that the diagnostic computers that we, every car is just basically a computer with like 4 wheels these days, right? So all of the diagnostic tests that need sort of a separate network because of our cybersecurity at the school. And not a lot of the other schools have faced this, but we're one of only 5, comprehensive high schools in the whole state. So that might not be a big number to face this, but Seoka Motors did, and that's one of the reasons we have the occupational committees. So we have some of the local auto dealers and auto repair places that work in conjunction with our automotive programs. So they've actually solved the problem. So I think we got and somebody reached out from Seoka Motors to me to say, let's set up that meeting, let's figure it out together, because we already figured it out around our, to basically create a separate pathway from our traditional cybersecurity pathways at the school. So
That was basically it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, back to Carlene for CAC Athletics.
Yeah, we just had a meeting the other day, and basically we just went over a lot of the fall programs that's ending and the winter that's starting. And so the fall upgrades were very well received with the new video scoreboard, the new turf in Memorial Fields, and even the opponents were saying how wonderful it was. So they were very happy, the new lights. So that was very positive. For the fall sports recap, we had 8 D6 champions, so that was pretty good. That was very good. For the winter numbers, we're still getting winter numbers, and the total is about 581. The girls wrestling is going well. We have 2 coaches for the girls wrestling. We have 7 girls in the high school and 7 to 8 girls in the junior high. And then we're also having a lot of intramural activities coming up for the elementary, middle, and high school. And there's a few new ones like in intramural tennis, intramural ping pong, racket sports at Mount Nittany. And we also going to have intramural high school bowling for our special ed students, and this is the first time that we're doing that since COVID. So that's basically it.
All right, thank you. CAC facilities, Gretchen and/or Peter.
Have not met since our last meeting, have we?
No, there was a meeting last week.
Oh.
Yeah, we had the not very good meeting in the end of October. And this past meeting, Mr. Fisher, I have to say, Mike Fisher was so prepared for this meeting. It was so good. He really brought it home. So we had an update for them on the Mount Nittany Elementary project that included quite a bit about the classrooms, the services that it'll provide, the increase in the footprint. We had we had an administrator with traffic patterns, the field. There was a lot on that, and so just really looking at the footprint of that building, the inside of that building, and a lot of good questions from, we have some really good people on that committee, and so I think that they felt like their time was well spent for that. And then also on the district-wide facilities master plan update, and including what is coming with Park Forest Middle, I think that there was a lot of satisfaction in that meeting for the members of the CAC who were concerned previously that their expertise was not being adequately utilized by the district, and that did not happen this time. I think that certainly one member had lots of questions, got them basically all answered. We were able to pose a few questions that will come up in the district-wide facility master planning process, and I would say it went really quite well. Carlene or Amy, is there anything you want to add? No? Okay, great.
All right, thank you. School health and safety, Amy. Finance, Deb and Laurel.
We didn't have a meeting since the last board meeting, so.
Okay, thank you so much. School health and safety, Amy and Dan. No meeting. And we haven't had a technology CTC meeting either. So this concludes our agenda for this evening. Looking ahead to future meetings, we have the already thrice mentioned November 29th, 2023 Finance and Audit Committee. So come on by. It's going to be a great place to be.
So many people.
Noon at Panorama Village Administrative Center Boardroom. December 4th will be our board reorganization meeting here in this board meeting room at 7 p.m. And then that will be followed by the December 4th Committee of the Whole regular board meeting, which immediately follows the reorganization meeting. December 18th, we do have a board coffee with the community scheduled. For this meeting, it will be prior to a board meeting. So it will be at 5 o'clock here in Panorama Village Administration Center. And then at 7 o'clock on December 18th, we will have a board meeting, a regular board meeting. So double duty that night. We'll ask for 2 trays of cookies. So I would now like to call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. So moved.
Second.
Second. Jim, you want a third?
Third.
Third, okay, good. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you so much, everyone.